Chapter 19:29. Damned beast, it doesn't matter if you die, but that lava heart is something that I need to enter the legend realm. Leave it here. Yuelao was furious. He had long regarded the lava heart as his own. At this moment, the lava overlord was actually burning the lava heart. It was simply burning his heart. Boom! But before he could continue speaking, the lava overlord had already pounced over. At this moment, the lava overlord's eyes were already red and it had gone mad. Just like what it said, even if it died, it would drag him down with it. It was as though it had gone mad. The lava overlord's entire body was like a burning flame. It smashed a huge hole into space and directly pounced in front of Yuelao. Abyssal demonic flame fist. It roared. It was enraged and crazy. Boom! Yuelao was once again blasted away. It was easy to attack and defend. In just an instant, the situation where Yuelao originally had the upper hand had changed. The lava overlord that had ignited the lava heart had used its future stagnant in exchange for its current powerful combat strength. Like a terrifying tyrant, a terrifying monarch, it crazily bombarded Yuelao. All the defenses that Yuelao had constructed were completely useless. They couldn't block it at all. It was as though they were on a completely different level. And as time passed, the wind domain was gradually suppressed by the lava overlord's flame domain. It even started to collapse bit by bit, causing Yuelao's advantage to be lost bit by bit. It became a disadvantage. Boom! 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 Yuelao's entire body was continuously blasted away by the enraged lava overlord like a rubber ball. And during this period, those experts from the floating mountain tried to rescue Yuelao. But the result was that they were instantly burned to ashes by the enraged lava overlord. Although the lava overlord couldn't do anything to Yuelao for a while, and couldn't kill him completely, these experts who were only at the peak of the profound life realm were still as weak as ants in front of it. They were completely not its match. They were all killed. And under the lava, Yishuan opened his eyes wide and watched quietly. The outcome was about to be decided. No matter what the outcome was, it was only a moment before he made his move. He breathed slowly, expelling all distracting thoughts from his mind. He only had one chance, and he could only attack once. He was like a venomous snake in the dark, waiting for an opportunity. Either he didn't attack, or he attacked to decide the outcome. As time ticked by, Elder Yu's aura grew weaker and weaker. Compared to his previous high spirits, he was now extremely weak. After so many attacks, he had already suffered heavy injuries. However, the lava overlord wasn't any better. After passing its peak, it started to weaken rapidly. At this time, both sides were competing in willpower. If Yuelao was killed first, then the lava overlord would win. However, if the lava overlord weakened first, then the consequences would be unimaginable. Both parties were very clear, including the lava overlord. This was the consequence of igniting the lava core. However, it had no other choice. At least it still had a chance to fight if it ignited the lava core. Otherwise, it would definitely die in Yuelao's hands. Both sides seemed to have gone mad as they kept attacking each other in the void, not giving each other any chance to catch their breath. It was as if both of them had gone mad, completely mad. Suddenly, an incomparably loud explosion could be heard in the void. The situation that seemed like it was going to continue was decided in an instant. However, both of them were completely still in the void. Yuelao's eagle claws grabbed the lava overlord's chest and pulled out its lava core. He smiled weakly and coldly. After waiting for a long time, this opportunity had finally arrived. Although the lava overlord's strength had increased greatly due to its rage, it had also lost its rationality. This gave him a great opportunity. The lava overlord's eyes widened in disbelief. Its millstone-like eyes reflected complete disbelief. It actually turned out to be like this in the end. The lava core was the core of its everything. To a life form like it, even if its head was bitten off, it could still be reborn. However, if its lava core was taken away, it would only mean death. Rumble! Then, after the lava overlord's lava core was taken away, its body quickly stiffened before it crumbled bit by bit and dissipated in the wind. Ha! Cough, cough, cough. Yuelao laughed heartily and didn't care even if he coughed out blood. He had finally succeeded. Although he had paid a huge price, it was still worth it. As for the quota token, it wasn't even worth mentioning in his eyes. It should be said that it was only something that came along the way. He didn't come here just for these children's matters. In order to step into the myth realm, he was willing to do anything. As long as he could take another step forward, he would be able to break away from his current awkward realm and become one of the true rulers of the mystic world. Damn it, this beast deserves to die. However, he still felt exceptionally depressed when he saw that most of the lava core had been used up. If he hadn't acted in time, there might not even be this little left. However, it was still better than nothing. With the help of the lava core, it would be much easier for him to step into the legendary myth realm. He firmly grasped the lava core in his hand. Even if his palm was already burnt, he didn't care at all. A fanatical look slowly appeared in his eyes. At this moment, he suddenly felt an extreme sense of danger. Just as he was wondering where this feeling of extreme danger came from, all of a sudden, the entire magma began to boil crazily. Then, with a loud bang, it completely turned into a raging wave. Then, an earth-shattering saber light leaped out of the magma and got closer and closer. His eyes were filled with incomparable fear. He had never imagined that there would be such an attack at this time. He wasn't prepared at all. Even if he was prepared, it would be useless. In his current state, even a slightly stronger profound death stage expert wouldn't be able to deal with him. Recovery. As a peak profound death stage expert, there was naturally no need to talk about his recovery ability. As long as he was given enough time, just a little bit of time, he would be able to recover. However, this enemy didn't give him that kind of time. Poochie! The blade light landed on his body. Almost in an instant, it blasted him into two halves. Blood immediately spurted out. Before he died, he finally figured it out. He had always felt that he had missed something, but he couldn't remember what it was. Now he finally realized what he had missed. It was that kid named Yi Shiwen. He must have missed him, which was why he was so uneasy. As expected, the magma slowly parted and a figure walked out from it, catching the lava core that had fallen. Who else could it be if not Yi Shiwen? He had originally thought that Yi Shiwen was already dead. At the very least, he should be seriously injured. Who knew that Yi Shiwen would be completely fine? In other words, he was completely fine just now. He had been hiding below and watching the battle between the two sides. Such a scheme was simply unimaginable. In other words, when he was scheming against the lava overlord, he had already been schemed against by Yi Shiwen. It was like hitting a goose for a lifetime, but in the end, the goose had pecked his eyes. He couldn't accept it. He couldn't accept it. He was at the peak of the profound death stage. In the end, he was defeated by a fellow at the early profound death stage. He had originally thought that he was nothing, and that he could casually crush this fellow to death. However, in the end, he had actually dominated everything. When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. This was the last sentence that appeared in his mind. Yi Shiwen held the lava core in his hand. He could feel the terrifying and enormous energy within it. Even though the majority of the energy had already been consumed, it was only enough for Yuelao and the lava overlord, who were at the peak of the profound death stage. For Yi Shiwen, it was still quite a lot. With this lava core, Yuelao could even use it to step into the legend stage. For Yi Shiwen, even if there was only a small amount of energy left, it was still enough for him to step into the intermediate profound death stage. For him, this was a huge harvest. There was nothing more important than this. Other than this, all of Yuelao's wealth had also fallen into his hands. As an expert at the peak of the profound death stage who had cultivated for more than 10,000 years, one could imagine how rich his wealth was. Even though a large portion of it had been used for cultivation, the remaining portion still amounted to tens of millions of Xian pills. There were also too many other rare treasures to count. This made Yi Shiwen feel as if he had become rich overnight. The Profound Death Realm initial stage and the Profound Death Realm peak stage simply did not seem to be in the same realm. He had only obtained a few 100,000 Xian pills after killing the Tian and Xiao elders. Compared to Yuelao, who had tens of millions of Xian pills, they were simply not in the same realm. However, under normal circumstances, he would not have the idea of killing a peak profound death stage expert. That would be no different from seeking his own death. This was merely an accident. However, this accident allowed him to not have to worry about not having enough Xian pills in the short term. Many powerful auras were approaching from afar. Just now, before the lava overlord had died, it had summoned those ferocious beasts from the lava plain. Even though they were not as powerful as the lava overlord, they were still not something that Yi Shiwen could match up to. Without any hesitation, he parted the magma once again and directly headed towards the lava overlord's cave. This was an extremely wide cave. The gate, which was hundreds of meters tall, was made of an extremely rare metal. This gave Yi Shiwen a premonition that the wealth within the lava overlord's cave would far exceed his imagination. Without any hesitation, he directly rushed in. Chapter 1930. After opening up the lava overlord's lair, Yi Shiwen charged into it. It was extremely smooth. Although the lava overlord had left behind some formations, it was not a difficult task for Yi Shiwen. This kind of special life form was especially talented in certain aspects. However, their attainments in other aspects were not high. For example, the lava overlord's comprehension of the laws of fire could be said to be world-shaking. However, in the aspect of formations, it was just child's play in front of Yi Shiwen. However, with its cultivation, if it had not been eliminated by others, how could Yi Shiwen take advantage of it? When one's strength reached a certain level, even if it was just a minor aspect, it would still be able to display astonishing battle strength. Yi Shiwen glanced over, and the first thing that entered his eyes was a mountain of Xian cores, spirit crystals, and so on. All of them were scattered on one side. Even some bloodstains could be seen. It was completely conceivable that these should be the corpses of the experts of various clans who had mistakenly entered the lava overlord's territory and died tragically at his hands. Their wealth had all fallen into the hands of the lava overlord. Yi Shiwen roughly looked over. Although there were piles of Xian cores, they were slightly less than the amount of Xian cores that Yuelao had on him. There were less than 8 million in total. He could not help but feel somewhat disappointed. The lava overlord had an illustrious reputation, but it did not have so many Xian cores. Even after converting the spirit crystals, it was still not much. He naturally knew that the majority of them had probably been consumed by the lava overlord. However, what he did not know was that Yuelao could not possibly have so much wealth in the depths of the mountains. It was only because he had brought along other people that he had so much wealth with him. However, all of it had now become Yi Shiwen's. As for the lava overlord, it was unknown how many years it had taken for it to accumulate such wealth. After collecting all of these, the amount of Xian cores on Yi Shiwen's body had already exceeded 20 million. It could be said that he had become rich overnight. Even many peak profound death realm experts did not have such a net worth as Yi Shiwen. His net worth was almost comparable to those legendary figures. Of course, this was only in reference to the number of mysterious pills. The true wealth of those peak profound death stage experts were those rare natural treasures that could be sold for a high price in the outside world. In addition to these Xian cores, Yi Shiwen's biggest harvest was actually some secret techniques. Some of the secret techniques carried by some experts had fallen into the hands of the lava overlord over a long period of time. However, the lava overlord was a special life form, and all of its magical powers were innate abilities that could be automatically comprehended. So, it was impossible for it to learn these martial arts. However, this was a very big fortune for Yi Shiwen. Among them, there was no lack of top-notch techniques of various sects or clans. After learning these techniques, Yi Shiwen's battle prowess would rise to a whole new level. A martial art that could catch the eye of an existence like the lava overlord and be left behind naturally wouldn't be simple. However, at this time, he had no time to study, so he could only put it aside for now. When the time came, there would be plenty of opportunities for him to study. In addition to these, there were also some natural treasures. These natural treasures could not be absorbed by an existence like the lava overlord, nor could it be digested. It could only be thrown here like rubbish gathering dust. However, with Yi Shiwen's intervention, all of these natural treasures fell into his hands. There were also some top-grade natural treasures that could only grow in the lava plain. Dragon flame grass. This plant only grows in the deepest part of the lava. It only grows once every 10,000 years. Anyone who cultivates in fire attribute martial arts or magical powers would immediately rise to a new level after consuming it. TSK. If I sell it, wouldn't those who cultivate in fire attribute martial arts or magical powers go crazy? Yimo helped Yi Shiwen to check out these natural treasures. Even with his insight, there were only a few items that could catch the old man's eye. You have to keep this. If you swallow it, the Nanmingli fire within your body will immediately rise to a new level. It will have the ability to transform into a stronger flame. However, it's best to give it to that girl, Hua Minghan. For you, the Nanmingli fire is only a means of attack. However, for Hua Minghan, it is a means of life and death for her. If the Nanmingli fire within her body can transform again, then she will immediately climb to a new level. At that time, I'm afraid that no one in the same level would dare to surpass her. There's also this geocentric blazing flame lotus and 99 scorching sungrass. TSK, they're all good items that can only grow in such an extreme environment. Compared to ordinary heavenly treasures, they're many times more precious. For those who practice fire attribute martial arts, if you're willing to sell them, they'll be willing to go bankrupt to get them. Not only can they increase their cultivation, but they can also change their physique, making them more compatible with fire attribute laws. In the future, they'll be able to reach an even higher peak. In the end, their physique can even be compared to the lava overlord, a natural creature. Apart from these, although the other heavenly treasures were not bad, they were obviously not enough to enter Yi Mo's eyes when compared to the top-notch heavenly treasures produced in the lava plain. His eyes were so sharp that other heavenly treasures that were slightly inferior would also be fought over by others outside. To him, anything that could not be used was equivalent to trash. A smile appeared on Yi Shiwen's face. For him, these things were just the icing on the cake. In fact, it was very likely that they would conflict with the other martial arts he practiced. However, for Hua Minghan, these were good things. Hua Minghan had stimulated the bloodline of the Phoenix clan, and her physique had also begun to move closer to that of the Phoenix clan. It was almost like those innate creatures that could use fire attribute martial arts and magical powers. The Phoenix clan was an innate divine beast that represented the fire attribute. One could well imagine the significance of these things for her. Perhaps it would be considered light if she were to step into the profound death realm on the spot. In addition to these natural treasures, there were also some broken magic tools. These were all broken magic tools that had once been used by experts who had fought against the lava overlord. Most of them still had traces of flame erosion. They should have been destroyed by the lava overlord. Although these magic tools weren't very valuable, the materials used to refine them were also considered rare. Therefore, Yi Shiwen didn't let them go and collected them all. After stepping into the profound realm, the wealth on his body had been consumed at an extremely fast pace. Every step forward would consume more than what he had originally calculated. In fact, it was a lot more than what he had originally calculated, especially after he had condensed his martial arts incarnation. The price to pay for possessing a powerful battle strength was that it would be much more difficult to cultivate compared to ordinary people. For him, no matter how much wealth he had, it wasn't enough. It was the same even if he had the Devil King's treasury. There were still a lot of gaps. Basically, he had to spend as much as he could. In addition to these, there was also Yi Shiwen's main objective for coming here this time, the Nameless Tao College's entry token. It was a bronze token that exuded an ancient aura. It was unknown how many years of history it had. Its quality was already extraordinary. No matter how much Yi Shiwen probed it with his divine sense, it was useless. There was no way he could find out what kind of material this token was made of. However, what really surprised him was that the lava overlord's strength could be said to be at the peak. Unless a legendary figure took action, it would be impossible to do anything to it. But now, This entry token had been placed here by someone from the nameless Tao College, and the lava overlord hadn't even sensed it. What kind of powerful means would be required to achieve such a feat? The power of the nameless Tao College was probably even more powerful than he had imagined. One could imagine just from the fact that they could easily accomplish something that he had thought impossible. However, no matter what, this token was his main objective for coming here. He immediately stored it in the Tianyuan mirror. At this time, he had already plundered all the wealth here. Other than those Xian cores and spirit crystals, the rest of the wealth could not be estimated at all, including the tens of millions of Xian cores that Yuelao had on him. Even though he had been used as cannon fodder and had been schemed against once, his gains far outweighed his losses. As for the yin-yang life and death power in the yin-yang diagram of life and death, he could slowly replenish it later. It did not affect his usage, and was not even worth mentioning when compared to these gains. In fact, Yi Shiwen even thought that if there was a need, there was no harm in being used as cannon fodder a few more times. Naturally, this was just a thought. He was very clear that his success this time was largely accidental and could not be replicated. Even if he had only faced an ordinary peak profound death realm expert, his strength was not something that Yi Shiwen, who had just stepped into the peak early profound death realm, could compare with. There was a high possibility that he would be killed if he were to do it again. After plundering all the wealth, Yi Shiwen did not hesitate at all. He immediately separated from the lava and rapidly escaped. Not long after he left the lava sea, he felt that many tyrannical auras had already descended in that area. There were some special and powerful existences in the lava plane. Even though they were not as powerful as the lava overlord, they were still tyrannical. If Yi Shiwen had been slightly slower, he would have been blocked by them, and the consequences would have been simply unimaginable. At this time, he did not have the mood to care about the movements of these lava creatures, and directly flew towards the place where Huang Menghan was staying. More than half of the gains this time were extremely important to Huang Menghan. He was also filled with joy and wanted to let Huang Menghan know as soon as possible. However, there was a slight feeling of unease in his heart. This feeling directly rushed into his heart and caused his heart to jump for no reason. At his level of cultivation, this kind of warning was definitely not groundless. It could only be that he had missed something previously. Thinking of this, he did not dare to stay any longer, and the speed at which the storm wings flapped behind him increased by a few notches. Chapter 1931. Above the sea of lava, Huang Menghan was under the onslaught of countless deviant flames. Her delicate body was on the verge of collapsing. Her small face was strangely flushed, and the anger in her eyes seemed to be about to spit out. Her defenses were repeatedly broken by the heavenly fire young master, and she was forced to retreat again and again. I was wrong about you. I didn't expect you to be such a person. Huang Menghan bit her lower lip and forced herself to sober up. She then said in an angry voice, "Such a person? What kind of person am I? Huang Menghan, do you think that you're a fairy? Everyone revolves around you for no reason. In fact, none of your pursuers don't have any ulterior motives." The heavenly fire young master's complexion was incomparably cold. He had already forced Huang Menghan into a corner. But he wasn't worried at all. "I can't compare to your despicable means." Huang Menghan was extremely angry. She clenched her silver teeth and said. She couldn't help but smile bitterly in her heart. Even if Yi Shiwen had warned her before, she still fell into his trap. Perhaps she had never thought that he would be so despicable. Despicable? That's ridiculous. I didn't expect you to be so naive. The heavenly fire young master seemed to have thought of something funny. He wasn't in a hurry to attack. Anyway, the more you try, the more the medicinal properties will penetrate into your body. It won't work, so don't struggle. I won't let you succeed, even if I have to die. Huang Menghan said while gasping for breath. Humph, I know what you're waiting for. Are you still waiting for Yi Shiwen? It's useless. It's impossible for him to escape from Yuelao's palm. I think you should know about Yuelao's methods. If it weren't for the Southming mythic fire inside of you, I wouldn't need to go through all this trouble. If I can get the Southming mythic fire inside of you, I'll reach the consummate level. When that happens, I'll be able to step into the godmyth level and become the sovereign lord. If you submit to me now, then when I step into the Tao validation realm, I'll definitely benefit you. I'll rule over all creation, and you'll be the mother of all creation. Once I extract the South Ming mythic fire from you, I'll hand you over to the most despicable person in existence. You'll be humiliated for 1,000 years, or even 10,000. The words of the heavenly fire young master could be said to be malicious. His complexion was somewhat sinister. He couldn't restrain the anger in his heart as he thought of the humiliation that she and Yi Shiwen had brought upon him. It was as if he had been slapped in the face on the spot. Hua Menghan continued to resist in the face of the heavenly fire young master's pressure. Her body had already begun to sweat profusely. Every time she used her martial power to resist, it was extremely difficult for her. She understood that if this continued, then what he had said would become a reality. The Nanming mythical fire in her body continued to boil. It took the form of an angry phoenix and flew towards the sky. However, her imposing aura was getting weaker and weaker. She was being pressured by the heavenly fire young master. Her Nanming mythical fire could be said to be infinitely powerful. It was the innate magical power of the phoenix race. However, the heavenly fire young master's body was shouldering several kinds of unusual flames. The Nanming mythical fire couldn't display its full power in front of him. Moreover, the most important thing was that her martial power was gradually being sealed. In fact, she was gradually becoming muddle-headed. The heavenly fire young master wasn't in a hurry to press forward. He had already forced Hua Menghan to this extent. So, the only thing left to do was to push the boat with the current. There was no need to take any risks. If Hua Menghan was forced into a corner, then perhaps she would turn into a storm. Hua Menghan, you forced me to do this. Who does that kid think he is? How could he do this? The heavenly fire young master couldn't restrain his anger when Yi Shiwen was mentioned. His expression flickered with jealousy. Many people coveted Hua Menghan. However, how many people could be like Yi Shiwen and hold her hand the moment they met? The heavenly fire young master was no exception. This made him feel as if his dignity had been trampled on. I didn't want to act like this. I wanted to slowly obtain your heart. However, it doesn't matter now. Wait for my divine power to reach the great success stage. Then, I'll be unrivaled in the nameless Tao College. When that time comes, I'll become a legendary figure. You and that kid will be nothing more than a flash in the pan. The heavenly fire young master sneered. Everything was within his expectations. Despicable. You still want to compete with him? Don't even think about it. Hua Menghan clenched her teeth and spat out these words. Slut, you're so stubborn. Let's see how long you can be so stubborn. When the time comes, let's see if you can still think of him when you're pleasuring yourself under my crotch. The heavenly fire young master's eyes were extremely sinister. A proud son of the heavens like him simply couldn't tolerate the slightest bit of disregard or contempt, regardless of whether it was intentional or not. How dare you? Heavenly fire young master, I'll take your life. Suddenly, a loud roar came from afar. The sound waves swept over like cannonballs, heading straight for the heavenly fire young master. The heavenly fire young master's expression changed greatly when he heard this voice. Impossible! How can you still be alive? He immediately reacted. According to the normal plan, he should have been killed by now. How could he appear here at this time? This was simply impossible. He continuously blasted out mystical flames to surround himself. The waves of sound blasted on his body and were immediately dissolved into nothingness. However, at this moment, a violent tearing sound came from the void. It was abnormally ear-piercing. Whoosh! A golden figure instantly appeared in front of him. He opened his eyes wide. This time, he was certain that he wasn't mistaken. Under that endless golden light, there was indeed an angry face. I'll take your life? Yi Shiwen was like an angry dragon whose reverse scale had been touched when he saw Hua Menghan like this. He clenched his 5 fingers into a fist. Immediately, the golden light that filled the sky transformed into a monstrous fist energy, which directly blasted into the void. Bang! A loud explosion sounded. The fist energy was like a spiral energy and directly blasted into the shield of the heavenly fire young master's mystical flames. These mystical flames were instantly smashed by Yi Shiwen and disappeared without a trace. These mystical flames wanted to burn Yi Shiwen, but it was useless. They couldn't even break the divinities on the surface of his body. Bang! The fist fiercely blasted into the heavenly fire young master's body. Suddenly, only a mournful sound of bones breaking could be heard. The heavenly fire young master's chest instantly caved in, and his entire body was sent flying like a cannonball. He tore a huge crack in the sky and flew far away. Die! Yi Shiwen's attack had not ended. In a fit of rage, Yi Shiwen suddenly stomped downwards, as if he was going to destroy the world. The void completely collapsed under his stomp. Yi Shiwen ruthlessly stomped into the heavenly fire young master's body. The heavenly fire young master was like a cannonball and ruthlessly blasted into the sea of lava below. Splash! A loud sound was heard. The heavenly fire young master was completely submerged by the lava. Boom! A loud explosion sounded. Yi Shiwen directly leapt into the sea of lava. The powerful aura that erupted from his body instantly vaporized the lava within a 100-mile radius and revealed a huge hole. The phantom of the heavenly fire young master was revealed. At this time, his eyes were still filled with disbelief. He couldn't imagine that he would be attacked by Yi Shiwen. It could be said that he didn't even have the strength to fight back. Regardless, he had already stepped into the profound death stage. He had never imagined that there would actually be a day where he would be beaten to such an extent where he was unable to retaliate against a young expert of the same generation. This had completely destroyed all the confidence and pride in his heart. He was already so furious because of Yi Shiwen's declaration of sovereignty. In essence, it was because of his pride and confidence. He would not allow anyone to provoke him. Anyone who provoked him would have to die. Yi Shiwen had used 2 attacks to directly shatter his confidence and pride. At this moment, he finally felt fear. The man before him could really kill him. Moreover, he was unable to retaliate at all. Although they were both at the initial profound death stage, the gap between him and Yi Shiwen was like the difference between clouds and mud. They did not seem to be on the same level. The fist incarnation was faintly discernible behind Yi Shiwen. Its body carried a powerful aura, like an Azura that had crawled out of hell. He had already completely released the anger in Yi Shiwen's heart, erupting like a volcano. He forcefully endured the injuries on his body. Immediately, he turned into a ray of light and flew into the distance. Trying to leave? Do you think you can leave? Isn't it a little too late to leave now? Yi Shiwen's ice-cold tone did not contain the slightest emotion. He was just like a robot. Swish! His large hand suddenly appeared. It expanded in the air, growing larger and larger. Then, it swatted down like he was swatting a fly. Bang! A loud sound rang out. The heavenly fire young master was directly smashed. He let out a blood-curdling scream as his body split into pieces on the spot. In his rage, Yi Shiwen did not hold back at all. He directly smashed the heavenly fire young master's body into pieces, causing him to instantly suffer heavy injuries. Humph! Yi Shiwen's attack was like a tidal wave. He did not stop. His large hand was like a heavenly net as it grabbed towards the heavenly fire young master. Bang! Another loud explosion rang out. The heavenly fire young master screamed miserably as he was clawed into a bloody mist. They were both at the initial profound death stage. However, he had not been able to put up any decent resistance against Yi Shiwen's attacks. In the beginning, he had been caught unprepared. Later on, he had purely wanted to escape. In the end, he had been directly clawed to death by Yi Shiwen. Chapter 1932. Inside the Tianyuan mirror, a beautiful woman was in his arms. A delicate fragrance assailed his nostrils. Her white jade-like arms were tightly wrapped around Yi Shiwen's neck. Her tender body was like a water snake and was tightly wrapped around his waist. Help me! A delicate fragrance rushed into his nose. The originally fairy-like woman was quietly nestling in his arms. Boom! Hua Minghan's words were like a flood that finally broke through the dam and completely destroyed the last trace of reason in Yi Xuan. Her blue robe peeled off, revealing her smooth and tender jade-like skin. Yi Xuan bowed his head and kissed her charming lips. Suddenly, he saw Hua Menghan's eyes wide open and motionlessly staring at him. What's wrong? Yi Xuan stopped and asked. I want to see you clearly. I want to see everything clearly. After saying this, Hua Menghan took the initiative to kiss his lips and pushed him down onto her body. The two of them slowly intertwined and blended together. It seemed as if they were mutually venting their feelings. Hundreds of years of loneliness had been comforted at this moment. Yi Xuan didn't know how much time had passed, but the ball of light finally dispersed. Yi Xuan was standing in midair, and beside him, Hua Menghan was nestled up against him. She was wearing a cyan dress, and she didn't look like a celestial maiden anymore. Instead, she looked more like a shy and helpless little bird. Your heavenly tribulation is coming. This intercourse between the spirit and the body was extremely beneficial for both sides. Yi Xuan already had the dual cultivation method in his hands, but he had never tried it. He could feel that the power in his body was faintly erupting like a volcano, and it was about to enter the dual cultivation method. However, for the time being, he forcibly suppressed the volcanic eruption feeling and integrated it into his foundation. Compared to his benefits, Hua Menghan's benefits were even more direct. After fusing with the geocentric blazing fire, 99 flaming sun grass and dragon flame grass, her physique had become a pure flame physique. It was even purer than the lava lord, which was an innate fire elemental creature. Her control over the Nanming mythical fire had reached a whole new level. Most importantly, Hua Menghan, who had already stepped into the peak of profound life realm, was finally going to welcome her heavenly tribulation of profound death realm. Well, I'll go cross the tribulation first, Hua Menghan said gently. She seemed to have completely let go of herself and completed a transformation, both physically and spiritually. As soon as Hua Menghan came out of the space of Tianyuan Mirror, the heavenly tribulation immediately sensed her. Suddenly, a burst of rumbling sound came from afar, and tribulation clouds began to condense in the void. The multicolored tribulation cloud looked like a giant marshmallow, but the flickering lightning within it told everyone that it was an extremely dangerous existence. Yi Xuan used his divine sense to scan and knew that this was the five elements thunder tribulation. He had once encountered such a heavenly tribulation, but it was a mixed type of heavenly tribulation, and the five elements thunder tribulation was only a part of it. Moreover, the heavenly tribulation that Hua Menghan had encountered was far from being comparable to Yi Xuan's. Although it was far beyond the ordinary people could accept it, but compared to Yi Xuan, heavenly tribulation clouds was. Yi Xuan couldn't help but feel somewhat depressed. For an ordinary person, the five elements thunder tribulation was already considered as an extreme heavenly tribulation. It wasn't something that an ordinary person could encounter. However, the heavenly tribulations that he had encountered were more ferocious and more exotic than the previous one. It was as if they were targeting him. Of course, he had often used them to deal with his enemies. However, if this heavenly tribulation wasn't ferocious, then it wouldn't have such an exaggerated effect on an ordinary person, even if it had been upgraded to a higher level. It could be considered as having mixed advantages and disadvantages. As the saying goes, heaven will never bar all ways. Heaven will always leave a glimmer of hope for you. Walalala! The heavenly tribulation didn't wait for long and directly fell down. The first one to fall was the wood divine thunder. All kinds of wood-attributed divine thunder fell down, but for Hua Menghan, this was the easiest. She didn't even move. Her Nanming Li fire was constantly burning around her body. These wood divine thunder simply couldn't get close to her. Although it was a heavenly tribulation, but after all, it was wood-attributed, so her Nanming Li fire was able to restrain it. This level was almost not difficult at all. On the contrary, these wood divine thunder were absorbed into Yi Xuan's body. Previously, Yi Shiwen had told her that he could absorb the heavenly tribulation clouds for cultivation, so Hua Minghan began to try it. Yi Shiwen's tyrant body was unparalleled, and its tyrannical strength was enough to kill a dragon. However, Hua Minghan's heavenly phoenix body was not bad either. According to legend, Heavenly Phoenix was also considered as an imperial family in the Phoenix race. Hua Minghan had awakened her Heavenly Phoenix body, so even if her body was not good at the same aspect as her tyrant form, it was still possible for her to have such a strong physique. These Yi with divine thunder were constantly being melted and then directly digested into her body. Yi Shiwen could sense that Hua Minghan's aura was becoming more and more powerful. The heavenly tribulation didn't weaken her. On the contrary, it made her more and more powerful. Even though he knew that Hua Minghan had a 90% chance of success, but he still didn't dare to relax. So, he still had to watch from the sidelines. If something unexpected happened, then even if it would trigger the heavenly tribulation, he would still have to intervene. Walalala! The divine thunder of Wood of East soon came to an end. Soon, it entered the second phase of the heavenly tribulation, the divine thunder of Earth of Wu. All kinds of earthy yellow, divine thunder of Earth of Wu pounced down. Each divine thunder of Earth of Wu was like a huge mountain crashing down. When it landed on the surface of the magma, it would set off huge waves, as if it could destroy everything. It was even more terrifying than the Yi with divine thunder. More or less, it could pose some threat to Hua Minghan. However, she was no longer the same as she was in the past. After completing the dual cultivation with Yi Shiwen, her strength could not be said to be weak. In fact, it had far surpassed the peak of the profound life stage. Even the 5 elements lightning tribulation, which could already be considered as a heavenly tribulation that would cause ordinary people to pale at the mere mention of it, was basically nothing to her. After the 5th earth divine thunder, was the more difficult divine water divine thunder. These heavenly tribulations weren't static. On the contrary, the heavenly tribulation would increase by a level with each heavenly tribulation. Originally, the divine water divine thunder should have restrained Hua Minghan's attribute. However, everything was different after she had transformed into a pure fire attribute. That was because the attribute restraints in this world were mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. There was no absolute in this world. The more extreme one was, the more it was like this. Water could restrain fire. But, conversely, fire could also restrain water. Hua Minghan didn't become flustered even in the face of the divine water divine thunder. After that, the gung metal divine lightning rained down from the sky. The gung metal divine lightning directly turned into huge weapons. There were 18 different types of weapons. All of them were divine weapons that seemed capable of sweeping through everything in the world. Hua Minghan didn't hold back. She immediately took out the Nanmingli fire and directly refined these 7th metal divine thunder on the spot. These countless pure 7th metal divine thunder were refined by her into a golden long sword. This long sword was shining with golden light. It was dazzling. When she wore it on her body, it didn't seem to reduce her otherworldly appearance. Instead, it seemed to add a bit of heroic spirit. As these gung metal divine thunders were directly refined by Hua Minghan, the thunder tribulation of the gung metal divine thunders also passed very quickly. Soon, only the last gung fire divine thunders were left. For her, this was not a problem at all. These gung fire divine thunders could not cause any harm to her. On the contrary, she absorbed all of them to strengthen her Nanmingli fire. The huge fire phoenix behind her gradually began to condense and take shape. It was no longer the original vague appearance. It was becoming more and more clear. It was enough to show that her control over the Nanmingli fire had climbed to a whole new level. After a long time, when the 3rd fire divine thunder was completely absorbed, this time's heavenly tribulation finally came to an end. Hua Minghan could be said to be daunting, but not dangerous throughout the entire heavenly tribulation. This also made Yi Shiwen heave a sigh of relief. He was still a little worried. According to the standard of his heavenly tribulation, the probability of Hua Minghan crossing, it was simply less than 1 in 10. It could even be said that the probability didn't exist at all, especially when he was crossing the heavenly tribulation of the profound death realm. He was almost crossing the heavenly tribulation according to the standard of the profound death realm. If he hadn't taken the first step into the profound death realm, the consequences would have been simply unimaginable. After the heavenly tribulation was finally over, the aura on Hua Menghan's body continued to swell. It should be said that the aura on Hua Menghan's body had already become increasingly powerful when she started to absorb the third wood divine thunder. Her entire body was flickering with a green aura. However, at this very moment, this enormous power seemed to be completely unable to be restrained as it gushed out. Like a mountain torrent erupting, it could not be contained. Step by step, it climbed towards the peak of the profound life stage, bit by bit, and began to charge towards the profound death stage. Boom! 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 The aura on her body continuously exploded. Yi Shiwen did not take action. He only quietly watched. At this moment, no one could help her. She could only overcome it by herself in order to cross it. Moreover, this was related to her foundation after entering the profound death realm. She could not rely on the help of others. Finally, after a long time, the aura on her body and the real Yuan seemed to have accumulated to a certain extent. Facing a final eruption, she instantly broke through the barrier of the profound death realm and directly stepped into the profound death realm initial stage in a single breath. However, her current realm was still not stable. She still needed a period of time to stabilize it. After all, not everyone could fight like Yi Shiwen while stabilizing their realm at the same time. Hua Menghan directly entered the Tianyuan mirror to consolidate her cultivation. This required a period of closed-door training. Yi Shiwen also temporarily postponed his breakthrough. Now that he had obtained Hua Menghan's entry token, he could go to the Nameless Tao Academy to take a look. This mysterious Tao Academy had shaken the profound world for countless years. Chapter 1933. The Nameless Tao Academy was known as the most mystical place in the Xian world, nurturing generations of Xian world experts. Most of the big and small forces in the Xian world originated from the Nameless Tao Academy. It could be said that the martial arts of the world came from the Nameless Tao Academy. Although it was nameless, it was the most famous holy land of martial arts. Every time the Nameless Tao Academy opened, it was an earth-shattering event. There were 4 ancient cities surrounding the Nameless Tao Academy. Every time the Nameless Tao Academy opened, there were far more than just 100 disciples. In fact, many experts would come, and even some famous big shots would come in person, hoping to obtain something. Moreover, it was impossible for them to enter the Nameless Tao Academy. Over time, the 4 great ancient cities were formed. Every time the Nameless Tao Academy opened, the 4 great ancient cities would also reopen, and once again become a boiling cauldron of voices. Moreover, there were no ordinary people coming and going, only top-notch experts. This time was no exception. Although the Nameless Tao Academy had yet to open, the 4 great ancient cities were already packed with people and a hubbub of voices. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief as he gazed at the South City's city walls that were just inches away from him. He had come out of the lava plain and followed the direction of the Nameless Tao Academy, but he had encountered more than one ambush along the way. It could be said that he had narrowly escaped death several times. Although he knew that he was not invincible among his peers, he was not a pushover either. However, if he were to encounter those old monsters who had cultivated for tens of thousands of years, he would not have the slightest chance of winning. Facing those existences who had cultivated for tens or even hundreds of times longer than him, their cultivation had already reached an unimaginable realm. Although these old monsters had no use for the entry tokens, they all had juniors, and everyone wanted their juniors to enter the Nameless Tao Academy to study. At first, Yi Shiwen didn't understand why these old monsters were able to find him so accurately every time. However, after being ambushed so many times, Yi Shiwen unexpectedly learned that the Nameless Tao College's people had already tampered with the quota token. As long as one had a special method, they could discover the existence of the quota token. Otherwise, 100 entry tokens in the entire profound world battlefield would be no different from a drop of water in the ocean, and finding them would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. However, if one had a special method, they would be able to trace the location of the entry token. Previously, the Floating Mountain's Heavenly Fire Young Master and Yuelao had used this method to find the entry token in the Lava Overlord's lair. In fact, they weren't even the first batch. The people who had injured the Lava Overlord had come to search for the entry token. However, they hadn't succeeded and had retreated. For those who possess special techniques in the profound world battlefield, obtaining an entry token was no different from being a firefly in the dark night, incomparably dazzling and unavoidable. Even with Yi Shiwen's strength, he had to escape several times. He had even encountered several groups of experts at the peak of the profound death realm. These old monsters had gone crazy for the sake of their juniors, entering the nameless Tao Academy. Only by entering the 4 ancient cities could one avoid being hunted down. There were experts from the nameless Tao Academy overseeing the ancient cities. Therefore, even if the experts from the nameless Tao Academy had intentionally arranged for this, it was impossible for them to do such a thing right under their noses. The nameless Tao Academy's selection of people seemed to be completely random and depended entirely on luck. However, the real test for the nameless Tao Academy should be in the period from obtaining the entry token to entering the ancient cities. Some people were strong enough to kill all their enemies and were invincible. There were also some people who had the backing of a colossus, and no one dared to provoke them. Each had their own reasons. Those who could successfully enter the ancient cities were all outstanding individuals. It was possible that during this process, the entry token had already passed through many hands. The original owner had already been buried in the battlefield, and no one knew. Even if it was pure luck, to be able to reach the ancient city without anyone bumping into him was already heaven-defying luck. With such heaven-defying luck, even a pig would have limitless achievements in the future. This kind of person was commonly known as a protagonist. Even if he was a pig, he would still be a flying pig. No ordinary person could compare to him. Along the way, Yi Shiwen had encountered more than a dozen groups of people chasing after him. The weakest were at the profound death realm intermediate stage. Even so, Yi Shiwen was unable to defeat them, let alone those at the profound death realm pinnacle stage. He had fled in a sorry state all the way to this ancient city, Fallen Moon City. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but laugh at himself. After stepping into the profound death realm, he had become a little high-spirited. He had the illusion that all the heroes of the world were helpless against him. Even Jun Dingtian, a powerful enemy, was defeated by him. Even if Jun Dingtian was at his peak, Yi Shiwen had the confidence to fight him. However, what use was that? He was still being chased like a stray dog. In just a short month, he had completely sobered up, so what if he was truly invincible among his peers? There were many old monsters in the world who had cultivated for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. Compared to them, he was still so immature. Moreover, even among the younger generation, he wasn't considered invincible. Moreover, his opponents were all at the mythical realm. Regardless of whether it was the Abyssal Demon Master or the Divine Union Leader, they were all considered invincible existences in the mythical realm. He simply didn't have the qualifications to look up to them. All of a sudden, he curbed his originally somewhat arrogant thoughts. However, it also strengthened his resolve to rush straight to the peak of martial arts. Even if he had to become the enemy of the world, he would still carve out a path of blood. There were long traces of weathering on the walls of Fallen Moon City. These were the marks of time. Even though it had been fixed by an ancient array formation, there were still traces of time left behind after countless years. Apart from the gods, who could be immortal? In the entire Fallen Moon City, numerous valiant auras were faintly discernible, like tigers in hiding. Just the feeling alone was enough to give people the illusion of devouring the world. These were the hidden, peerless experts of the various races. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen discovered that many experts seemed to be discussing something at the city gate. These experts were at least at the profound life realm and above. There were simply no experts of the King Division present. There were even many existences at the peak of the profound life realm, and there was no lack of powerful existences at the early stage of the profound death realm. Yi Shiwen walked over and saw that everyone had surrounded the city gate. Yi Shiwen's keen senses told him that the city gate had actually been surrounded by an array formation. However, this array formation was extremely ingenious. It could be said that it had been set up by a great array formation master. If Yi Shiwen hadn't comprehended the great ghost heart flame formation and deduced it at the same time, he wouldn't have been able to detect it so easily. He could detect it with just a glance? Haha, this is interesting. This person is interesting. On the city wall, an eagle that was taller than a human was staring at Yi Shiwen. However, his aura was restrained. If it weren't for his huge body, he really wouldn't have been any different from an ordinary eagle. Yi Shiwen immediately felt a sharp consciousness sweep over his body. He immediately looked over and saw that the top of the city wall was empty. There was clearly no one there, but Yi Shiwen could clearly feel that someone was spying on him. There's an array formation? Yi Shiwen immediately reacted. The current him could be said to be unrivaled among his peers in the field of array formation. He could be called a master. Although he couldn't see through it with a glance, he could still easily see through it. Oh, he discovered me? The eagle was slightly surprised. He had observed these people through the array formation, but this was the first time he had been discovered. This person is quite interesting. Yi Shiwen seems to be a human being. It has been a long time since a peerless figure has emerged from the human bloodline in the Xian world. This is a bit interesting. A strange smile flashed across the corner of the eagle's mouth. Suddenly, the void distorted violently. Then, a middle-aged man strode out. You're still like this. What's the point of setting up such an array formation? The middle-aged man seemed to be unable to understand. How can a boring person like you understand this kind of thing? The eagle said with a slight smile flashing across the corners of his mouth. It's obviously your own bad taste. With your strength, even if you set up the array formation casually, it is impossible for these ordinary people to see through it. The middle-aged man looked helplessly at this old friend of his. Even if 10,000 years passed, this kind of bad taste wouldn't change. That's not necessarily true. If someone takes a look at the array formation that I set up, they will be able to detect that something is wrong. The eagle said, Impossible. Those ordinary people have ordinary eyes. How can they detect your array formation? They must have suffered a loss to be able to detect it. The middle-aged man simply didn't believe that someone could detect that something was wrong with just a glance. Even if it was just a detection and not breaking through the array formation, it was still very amazing. A master of array formation like this eagle could casually set up an array formation that could communicate with heaven and earth and integrate with heaven and earth. It was simply impossible for people to see through it. Even if someone accidentally broke into it, in the end, very few people would be able to recognize it. Many people went one round inside and came out not knowing what was going on. There really is such a person. That's why I said that this time's newcomers are quite interesting. They're much more interesting than our batch. That old guy spent his entire life to calculate this. In this world, there must be someone who can prove the Tao. I want to see who in the end can prove the Tao in this world. Chapter 1934. There are a lot of outstanding newcomers this time. Didn't many people think highly of Jun Dingtian? The reincarnation of a deity is much more difficult than an ordinary person's. But isn't that the case? Once you cross over, you will be able to prove your Tao. If you can't overcome the obstacles in your heart, you will never be able to make any progress in your life. The eagle squinted his eyes and said. His demeanor was no different from that of an ordinary eagle. Isn't it because of this? The difficulty is decided by a single thought. But for us, it's really difficult to prove our Tao. The middle-aged man sighed and said, However, if others were to find out that the once invincible golden-winged rock king has actually become like this, I wonder what kind of emotions they would have. The old eagle glanced at the middle-aged man and said, Time is like a knife, and every slash of it kills us. In the past, who among us has ever taken these words to heart? The time has come, the year has come, and we have no choice but to accept it. In this great era, this should be our last chance. If we can't seize this opportunity and leap over the dragon gate, then we can only wait in fear and turn into a cup of dirt. Ha ha ha, you're lying. How can a dignified golden rock king be afraid of death? The middle-aged man shook his head and said with a smile, "What do you mean by not afraid of death? Who is not afraid of death? It's just a nice way to put it. Those who are truly not afraid of death are those who have nothing to live for. But do such people really exist? I don't believe it." The eagle shook his head and said, "No matter what, I won't let go of this last chance. In this world, there must be someone who can prove his Tao." But he never said that the person who can prove his Tao must be one of those people. We also have a chance. Yes, yes, even ants want to live, let alone us. The middle-aged man laughed and said. The eagle glanced at him, then directly spread its wings and flew into the air. It flew further and further away and slowly disappeared. That middle-aged man also shook his head and laughed involuntarily. Then he slowly disappeared in the air. However, he couldn't help but glance at Yi Shiwen before leaving. Even the golden-winged rock king is surprised by this man. Who is he? It seems that things are getting more and more interesting. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt that sharp gaze disappear again. He couldn't help but be vigilant. Luoyue City was indeed worthy of being one of the few satellite cities of the nameless Tao College. It was indeed very impressive. It was just a city gate, and there was such an expert. For him, this was tantamount to ringing alarm bells. He must not be too complacent. What should I do? Damn it, who set up this array? If I find out, I will definitely twist his head and kick it like a ball. The one who spoke was a pig. It was a huge wild boar. It seemed to have used the magical power of the law world to shrink its body. Otherwise, Yi Shiwen could see at a glance that its body was more than 100 meters tall. It could be called a colossus. This wild boar was clearly a variant species. It was unknown whether it was from the demon race or some other race. Its body emitted a valiant aura. Its cultivation was at the peak of the profound life stage. Even among the experts present, it was not weak. Don't tell me that we have to hurry to other cities if this continues. If that's the case, won't we lose all our face? Exactly. Damn it. Isn't there a master among you who is known to be proficient in arrays? Why isn't there even a fart? At this moment, a huge golden lion with 3 heads could not help but curse. Its mood could be said to have plummeted after being blocked outside. There were a few people in the crowd who were known to be proficient in arrays. They could not help but become abnormally embarrassed when they heard those words. Hatred flickered in their eyes. Those who could be here could be said to be the pride of the heavens in their respective factions. When had they ever been humiliated like this? It was only because of the deterrence of the golden lion that they did not say anything. This lion was extremely powerful. Its profound death stage cultivation was enough to sweep through an area and look down on all living things. Yi Shiwen, what's wrong? A flame flickered beside Yi Shiwen. Within the flame, Hua Minghan's figure gradually became clear. After more than a month of consolidation, she had completely stabilized her cultivation. Therefore, there was no need for her to continue closed-door training. Just when everyone was talking about this, suddenly, the 3-headed golden lion suddenly turned its 3 heads and looked at Hua Minghan, who was standing beside Yi Shiwen. You have the smell of a quota token on you. Obediently hand it over. The 3-headed golden lion narrowed its long and narrow eyes with a cold expression. It was full of power. The moment the words quota token came out, everyone was immediately in an uproar. They had risked their lives to come to Fallen Moon City. In fact, wasn't it to see if there were any treasures that they could pick up and enter the nameless Tao College? Now that the woman in front of them had a quota token on her, it was naturally extraordinary for them. Sure enough, everyone quickly used their probing methods. Sure enough, they sensed the aura of the quota token on Hua Minghan's body. This kind of aura was the work of an almighty expert from the nameless Tao College. It was said that it was a technique passed down from ancient times. It was impossible to remove unless a myth realm expert personally removed it. However, if such an expert was escorting her, Would there be a need to be afraid of others having designs on this token? Therefore, for ordinary people, the aura of this quoted token was simply unexplainable. However, once they discovered it, they would know that it was genuine. Huaminghan's face suddenly turned cold. In order to obtain this token, she had gone through many twists and turns. How could she let others take it away? Hand it over. This is not something that a puny human like you is qualified to possess. That's right. Obediently hand it over. Otherwise, when the time comes, your life will be in danger. Suddenly, everyone started talking at once. In any case, at this time, the two of them were the target of public criticism. Even a profound life realm expert dared to yell at Huaminghan. You want to die? Yi Shiwen suddenly said indifferently. His voice instantly spread to everyone's ears. Everyone could easily feel the coldness in his tone. For more than a month, it could be said that he had been hunted down like a stray dog. He had been in a constant state of anxiety. The resentment in his heart had long accumulated to a considerable extent. Arrogant. Do you want to go against all of us by yourself? Audacious human. You're courting death. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. These people were frightened by Yi Shiwen's words. However, they immediately started to curse him one after another. For them, this was an extraordinary shame and humiliation. They had been frightened by a human being. It was an incredible shame and humiliation. What's there to be arrogant about? If you have the ability, come out and fight. I happen to be in a bad mood. I specialize in dealing with all kinds of dissatisfaction. Yi Shiwen sneered as he stared at these people. His gaze was like an ice-cold knife as it swept across their bodies. Human, you really don't know the difference between life and death. It's difficult for you to fight against so many people with two fists. Obediently hand over the quota token, or else your life will be in danger. Suddenly, an erratic voice sounded out from the crowd, and it was cold and sharp. However, it was unknown who had spoken this voice. Yi Shiwen frowned. Someone wanted to provoke these people to come and fight for the quota token. It was simply the idea of the fisherman who benefited from the fight between the sandpiper and the clam. Sure enough, after these people heard this, they suddenly became a lot more courageous and eager to try. The idea that the law does not punish the masses had existed since ancient times. It was not unique to a certain ethnic group. Who is it? If you have the ability, come out and fight with me. Yi Shiwen shouted in a cold voice. You're just a trivial human. Do you really think that you're an ancient god? That you can fight with whoever you want? The voice appeared again and said. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen moved instantly. His whole body erupted with countless golden energy, like a golden god. Boom! With a sudden stomp, his whole body flew out in an instant. The ground under his feet directly shattered on the spot. His whole body was like a mountain as he fell down. It was earth-shattering and incomparably terrifying. As he moved, Yi Shiwen's big hand directly grabbed towards the crowd. However, he saw a black figure in the crowd. Seeing that Yi Shiwen had made a move without hesitation, and that his first move was such a terrifying scene, he was immediately shocked and had a look of disbelief on his face. He had used the secret technique of his tribe. It could be said to be extremely powerful. Even experts at the Profound Death Realm Intermediate Stage or Profound Death Realm Advanced Stage would find it difficult to detect his secret technique. Who knew that it would be discovered by Yi Shiwen? It was simply an indescribable miracle. Yi Shiwen's big hand was getting closer and closer, and directly grabbed towards the black figure. His speed was as fast as lightning, and it was extremely fast. And here I thought that it was some kind of coward. If you want the quota token, then use your life to exchange for it. Yi Shiwen's expression was indifferent, and his big hand continued to grab. Bang! The black figure directly punched out, wanting to block Yi Shiwen's attack. Boom! However, the black figure's fist and Yi Shiwen's big golden hand collided fiercely. A terrifying aura swept out, like a raging wave hitting the shore, and shattered in all directions. However, in the instant that they clashed, the black figure's entire arm fell off on the spot, and blood splattered everywhere. It was unknown what race this black figure belonged to, and it looked extremely strange. Everyone's expression changed greatly. The black figure was not weak. The martial arts that he had blasted out contained the power of death. It was very obvious that he had already stepped into the profound death realm, and his strength was above the majority of people. However, he could not even block a single move from Yi Shiwen, and his entire arm was directly blown off. Yi Shiwen's strength was simply tyrannical and abnormal. Chapter 1935. They weren't scared by this bloody scene. Instead, they were scared by Yi Shiwen. All of them had killed their way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. So, it was impossible for this level of battle to move them. However, such a straightforward and efficient crushing had made their complexions change. This was an unknown race. Its entire body was black, like a black shadow. "What do you want to do?" The black shadow suddenly screamed in a sharp voice. "What do I want to do? Didn't you say that I wouldn't be able to keep my life? Then come and try. I told you that I specialize in dealing with all kinds of disobedience." Yi Shiwen sneered. He blasted his fist and displayed the Big Bang Stardust Fist. A group of brilliant lights burst out and crossed the vast sky. Then, it directly bombarded into the body of the black shadow and blasted it into pieces. Everyone was truly moved this time. Yi Shiwen had completely occupied the upper hand from a moment ago until now. Almost every strike of his could be said to be able to instantly end a peerless master. So powerful, the three-headed golden lion narrowed its eyes and said in a cold voice, "Are you doing this for me to see?" The golden fur on its entire body exuded a bright light under the sunlight. It was an ancient species with an extraordinary origin. Moreover, its bloodline was even more extraordinary. "Yes, so what?" Yi Shiwen coldly replied. "Do you want to die?" The three-headed golden lion's hair stood up in anger. The golden lights on its entire body tore through the vast sky. It was incomparably blazing. These golden lights turned into a torrent and directly bombarded towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen was about to attack. Suddenly, a flaming wall sprang up in front of him. The golden lights directly bombarded into the flaming wall. However, there was no way for it to break through the flaming wall. Yi Shiwen looked at Hua Menghan, who was standing beside him. It was Hua Menghan who had attacked a moment ago. "I'm the one who started this matter, so I'll settle it," Hua Menghan said. The flames on her body surged out, and she looked like a blazing goddess. An incomparably huge fire phoenix began to slowly condense behind her. Her expression became more and more indifferent. In her eyes, this three-headed golden lion was a powerful opponent as well. It was extraordinary and had to be treated seriously. Yi Shiwen opened his mouth, but still didn't make a move. Hua Menghan would inevitably become the target of public criticism once she obtained the entry token. So, the effect would naturally be much better than Yi Shiwen's. She would let a lot of people know that even if they had some tricks up their sleeves, it would simply be impossible to succeed. "How dare you two look down on me?" The three-headed golden lion seemed to be completely enraged. His entire body shone with golden light like a sun. His expression was incomparably grave, and there was a powerful energy surging within his body. "Roar!" He let out a deafening roar. Behind him, the illusory image of an incomparably huge, three-headed lion appeared. This was the illusory image of an ancient mutated beast. It was like a peerless, ferocious creature that could tear apart the heavens and earth, looking down on all living things. Golden light surged under his feet. He stood above this golden ocean, his aura devouring the mountains and rivers. An incomparably huge sharp claw rushed towards Hua Menghan. His sharp claw contained the universe and contained an unparalleled great way. It was very impressive. Yi Shiwen was watching from the side. At this time, Hua Menghan finally moved. The blazing flames on her body suddenly surged and formed a sea of fire. It was like two incomparably huge worlds collided with the golden ocean. Bang! The sea of fire and the golden ocean fiercely collided with each other, and a dazzling light erupted. It was as if two worlds had collided with each other. It was as if a star had exploded, and the light burst out in all directions. The martial arts domains of both sides collided with each other before the two of them started to fight. The power unleashed by the collision of two profound death stage experts had actually caused the entire world to shake. Fortunately, Fallen Moon City was built by an almighty in the ancient times and possessed extraordinary might. Furthermore, it was protected by countless ancient formations. If not, an ordinary city would have already been completely destroyed by the shockwaves from the collision. The collision between both sides was incomparably dazzling. How many outstanding youths who could reach the profound death realm weren't ordinary. Hua Minghan's complexion didn't change. Although she couldn't kill as frequently as Yi Shiwen, she wasn't a little girl who didn't know about worldly affairs. Ever since she had arrived at the ancient Phoenix world, she had used the name of Celestial Phoenix Maiden. She had fought countless powerful enemies and had experienced countless life and death situations. Countless flames surged on the surface of her body. These flames condensed into a flaming phoenix claw and directly grabbed towards the front claw of the three-headed golden lion. Bang! An incomparably loud collision sound resounded. Hua Minghan took a step back. She was slightly inferior to the three-headed golden lion in terms of physical strength. This three-headed golden lion was an ancient species. In ancient times, it had fed on the dragon race. It could even kill the dragon race. Its physical strength was its forte. Therefore, it couldn't do anything even though it was trapped outside the city gate. Moreover, its attainments in the field of formations weren't very high. It couldn't do anything about this formation. After gaining the upper hand, the three-headed golden lion pounced towards Hua Minghan in an instant. It seemed as if it wanted to use this advantage to its advantage. Yi Shiwen stood quietly on the side. He didn't attack. Sure enough, although Hua Minghan was slightly inferior in terms of physical strength, this wasn't her true strength. She immediately drew out a golden longsword. This was a long sword that she had refined from the heavenly tribulation. The long sword carried the incomparably dreadful might of the heavenly tribulation. It was made of western golden metal. Its might was unparalleled, and its sharpness was matchless. It swept out. Feng Lai Yi, she shouted softly. An astonishing swordlight shot out from the tip of her sword. The golden swordlight tore through a terrifying and mighty torrent and went straight towards the three-headed golden lion's head. The three-headed golden lion was about to pounce down and bite her head off. Who knew that this golden swordlight would suddenly appear out of nowhere? It was so sharp that the world in front of it instantly collapsed. It was horrified and had no choice but to dodge in an instant. It stepped on a golden wave under its feet, and its body was wrapped in principles. It twisted its body in midair and dodged this deadly blow. Whoosh! An extremely ear-piercing sound rang out. It barely managed to stop its body in midair. Its claws dug into the void and created 4 huge cracks in the void. This barely managed to offset the force of its previous attack. At this time, Hua Minghan stepped on a phoenix and pounced towards it. It seemed like this three-headed golden lion wasn't the only one who understood the concept of pursuing the enemy. Clang! The golden gung sword fell down and directly chopped the head of the three-headed golden lion. Sparks splashed in all directions, but the sword failed to break the defense of the three-headed golden lion. However, if one were to look carefully, one would be able to see that although the body of this three-headed golden lion was fine, the previous attack had made the color of its fur a lot dimmer. Obviously, it wasn't without any cost. It was incomparable to Yi Shiwen's incomparably tyrannical body. However, even so, it was still very amazing. The golden gung sword in Hua Minghan's hand was extremely pure and incomparably sharp. It could be said that it was invincible and could easily break through all obstacles. However, even so, the three-headed golden lion was directly sent flying. His pair of narrow eyes suddenly burst out with a terrifying light, and he shouted, "This is the martial technique of the Phoenix clan. Are you Hua Minghan?" He looked from afar and didn't launch a new attack. He was determined to win because he had absolute confidence in himself. However, everything would be different if the opponent was the famous Hua Minghan. Hua Minghan had been expelled from the ancient Phoenix world. However, anyone with a little bit of knowledge would know that this expulsion was useless. The ancient Phoenix world had truly given up on Hua Minghan. Then, the number of people chasing after her wouldn't be so few. They were merely putting on a show. Hua Minghan would still be a heavenly phoenix maiden as long as the Phoenix King still favored her as his adopted daughter. There were only a few possibilities to successfully obtain a quota token. Either one had extremely good luck, or one had formidable strength and was capable of killing all the invaders. Or one had to possess great influence, and everyone would have some misgivings about it. However, in everyone's eyes, Hua Minghan had the backing of a colossus like the ancient Phoenix world. It was a matter of course for such a person to have a quota token. After all, strength was respected, and influence was also a kind of strength. Moreover, the most important thing was that Hua Minghan herself wasn't a soft persimmon. Her strength was tyrannical. In addition, Yi Shiwen was sneering and glaring at her covetously. So, he didn't dare to casually attack her. Hua Minghan's expression was indifferent. The golden sword in her hand was incomparably blazing. You are qualified to have this quota token. The three-headed golden lion couldn't help but acknowledge the qualifications of Hua Minghan to have this quota token. Yes, this was a qualification. The strong only recognized the strong, and the weak would always be the prey of their prey. Do I need your approval to have this qualification? Yi Shiwen sneered and said. The three-headed golden lion swept his oppressive gaze towards Yi Shiwen and Hua Minghan. There was an ominous glint in his eyes. Although he was afraid of Yi Shiwen and Hua Minghan, but his dignity and pride absolutely wouldn't allow him to make the slightest concession. There is no need for the three of you to hurt our harmony. Our top priority now is to break this Jin method. If we can't even enter the Luoyuan city, then wouldn't we become a laughingstock? Wouldn't we become the laughingstock of others from now on? Suddenly, at this time, a big man whose whole body was made of crystal stone came out and said, seizing the quota token was their top priority. However, since they couldn't seize it, then they had to immediately change their direction. On this point, the outstanding heroes were surprisingly unanimous. Chapter 1936. There was still a chance to obtain the entry token, but if they couldn't even enter the Luoyuan city, then they would really become a laughingstock. This array formation directly caused the elites of the various races and forces to suffer a loss, causing their faces to be covered in dust. Wife, let's go. Don't worry about these idiots. Yi Shiwen pulled Hua Minghan and directly bypassed the city wall in front of everyone's dumbfounded eyes and entered through another door. Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at this scene, and then began to curse loudly. That's right, if this door couldn't be opened, they could just change to another one. Yet, they were stuck here for so long, yet they still wanted to make a fool of themselves. Actually, they were already making a fool of themselves. They were simply stupid. Their IQ was in a hurry. At this time, they suddenly felt a little red in the face, ashamed and angry. It was such a simple reason, but they had stubbornly chosen to go here. Wasn't this a sign of their IQ being in a hurry? However, they had always been tyrannical and invincible in their respective forces and clans. He had never encountered such a helpless situation before. Thus, for a moment, he only thought of breaking this formation and did not think of any other methods. It was like a racing car that suddenly encountered a turn at high speed, but was unable to make the turn at all, and directly crashed into it on the spot. At this time, how could they still have the face to stay here? They turned into streamers of light and rushed into the Luoyuan city. Yi Shiwen and Hua Minghan entered the Luoyuan city side by side. They had seen many clans before, but after entering the Luoyuan city, they found that those clans paled in comparison. Except for some powerful clans, most of the clans only had one or two people, and many of them were the elites of their respective clans. Although the number of clans was not large, but they could be regarded as tyrannical. No one knew how many clans there were in the 10,000 worlds, but as long as the clans were strong enough, they could be found here. The entire city was not too big, and compared to the tens of millions of cities in the Xian world, it was much smaller, but it had a sense of vicissitudes of history, and had gone through many hardships. After entering this city, there was a feeling of a great scholar talking and laughing, and there were no commoners coming and going. Those who could enter here were at least at the profound life realm or above, and were the big shots of the Xian world. In the profound world, although there were billions of living beings from various clans, those who could truly be considered as people with authority were experts at the profound life stage and above at the very least. Most of the people within the city were existences at the profound life stage and above. They were extremely powerful. Look, Diwu's sadness is starting the arena again. Suddenly, many figures in the surroundings turned into rays of light and rushed toward the city. Go, go! Yi Shiwen and Hua Minghan looked at each other and then followed the crowd. The two of them were wrapped in the crowd and followed him. Soon, they arrived at the center of Fallen Moon City. It was a very large and empty area that had been built into a very large arena. At this moment, on the arena, two figures were facing each other from afar. One of them was a youth who looked to be around 15 or 16 years old. He was pure white and crimson red, and he looked rather handsome. As for the other one, it was a burly man who was over 2 meters tall. However, this burly man's entire body was covered in long hair. He looked extremely sinister and terrifying. Who is Diwu's sadness going to fight this time? I don't know. I think it's the bloodthirsty hunter of the werewolf race. Within the werewolf race, those who can be crowned with the title of bloodthirsty hunter are very few elites. They are existences equivalent to elites. Someone who is knowledgeable pointed out. Isn't that right? This is the 10th time this month. It is said that Diwu's sadness has been stuck at the peak of the early profound death stage for a long time. He hopes to use these fights to temper himself so that he can step into the mid-profound death stage. Diwu's sadness? Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes. Among the 20 invitations, one of them belonged to a person called Diwu's sadness. In reality, it was not just others who were paying attention to him. At the same time, he was also paying attention to the experts who could be considered his opponents. Among the 100 invitations, the other 79 experts had yet to surface, so he did not know who they were. However, the owners of these 20 invitations were clearly known to him. The owners of these 20 invitations were young heroes who had made a name for themselves in the profound world over the past few years. And this Diwu's sadness was one of them. Because of his strange surname, Yi Shiwen paid even more attention to him. It was said that this Diwu's sadness had the backing of a huge Xian world family. The Diwu family had already appeared in the Xian world a long time ago. It was said that they had once produced a powerful family that had an immortal existence. Hence, they were also one of the famous families in the Xian world. However, they had always kept a low profile. Unlike the Divine Alliance and the Desolate Heaven Hall, who accepted disciples in a high-profile manner, they usually accepted disciples from their own family. Over the generations, only a few of them were able to travel outside. Every single one of these people was one of the strongest in history at that time. And this generation was even more impressive. In total, the Diwu family had only produced one descendant to travel outside. Ever since Diwu's sadness was born, he was known to be invincible among those of the same level and had never been defeated. He was extremely tyrannical and had a very high reputation among the younger generation. In addition, he was born in a family that had produced an immortal inheritance. Hence, he was regarded as the most likely existence to prove his Tao in this generation. It was just that Yi Shiwen had only heard of this Diwu sadness but had never seen him in person. He did not expect to see him here. As for the bloodthirsty hunter of the werewolf race, although he was not as famous as Diwu's sadness, the werewolf race itself was a race of experts. Among them, the bloodthirsty hunter was the strongest of the strongest, the elite of the elite. The lowest standard for recruitment was the profound realm and above. It was simply not a place that ordinary people could join. Hence, as long as the name of the bloodthirsty hunter was mentioned, everyone would know that there must be a peerless expert. At this time, these two people were completely facing each other on the stage, staring at each other. It was like the calm before the storm, looking for each other's flaws, fatal flaws. Using other people's hands to hone oneself. TSK. This Diwu's sadness really has some skills. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said, the corner of his mouth raised into a smile. If he wanted to prove his Tao in an invincible manner, Defeating these people was only the foundation. Among these people, Diwu's sadness was also a threshold. At this time, having the opportunity to see Diwu's sadness's strength was also not bad. This was also why he and Hua Menghan rushed over when they heard of Diwu's sadness's name. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Hua Menghan also had a solemn look on her face. She looked very serious. She couldn't take her eyes off the screen. She was a woman. However, age and gender didn't matter to anyone who was determined to prove their Tao. The only thing that mattered to them was to prove their Tao or to become a stepping stone for others. Just as Yi Shiwen had said, this wasn't something that an average person would dare to do, because one could get injured or even killed by others if they weren't careful. This was a double-edged sword. It could hurt others, but it could also hurt oneself. Therefore, this competition of Diwu's sadness could attract so many people to watch. Among these people, there were only a few who were here to watch the show. Most of them had the same thoughts as Yi Shiwen, and they all wanted to find out the details of these people. Especially for those who were interested in obtaining the quota token, this was even more important. No matter how strong Diwu's sadness was for them, this was a threshold that must be crossed. And after everyone had arrived, in the confrontation between the two people, the werewolf took the initiative to attack. It seemed that in such a confrontation of momentum, he was the first to be unable to hold on. Roar! The werewolf's hairy face directly opened his mouth and let out a long roar. Air waves crazily surged out, forming circles of monstrous waves that swept out. Fortunately, this arena itself had been specially strengthened, and there was a mark of a legendary figure in it. Otherwise, just this long roar alone could completely crush the surrounding 100 miles into powder. This was the terror of a profound death realm expert. The power of death represented destructive power, represented the power of attack, and grasped the power of death. Every movement of one's hand or foot would have a great power that could shatter the vacuum. Swoosh! The werewolf suddenly stomped on the ground, and a huge crack appeared. Just by relying on his powerful body, he was launched out like a cannonball. He opened his claws, and as if he was holding the moon in his arms, he directly charged towards Diwu Heartbreak, intending to tear him in half. And at this moment, Diwu Heartbreak finally made his move. There was no extra movement at all. His eyes suddenly lit up, and a longbow suddenly appeared in his hand. This longbow was engraved with mysterious patterns, like a simple and unadorned badge, but also like the profound truths of the world. At this moment, an intense light suddenly burst out, as bright as day. All the truths of the world and the laws of the world began to appear, and crazily boiled around his body. Swish! A sharp sound pierced through the air. The longbow in Diwu Heartbreak's hand was suddenly pulled back, and then in an instant, an arrow of light suddenly formed and shot out in an instant. Boom! The entire arrow of light spun in the air, madly absorbing the surrounding spiritual energy, and then formed a mighty energy tornado, sweeping out. This arrow of light, like a mighty energy tide, directly shot towards the werewolf's head. Even though his entire body had almost dissipated in the air, he was still targeted by Diwu Heartbreak. Chapter 1937. This arrow of light was like a mighty tide of energy, directly shooting towards the head of the werewolf. Even though his entire body had almost dissipated in the air, he was still locked onto by Diwu Heartbreaker. It was as if he had been locked onto by a radar, and there was no way to escape. However, with a loud roar, the werewolf was forced out of the void, as if he had nowhere to run. He could only roar fiercely, and his claws tore out a blood-red tide of energy. Bloodthirsty, sky-splitting claw. He let out a huge roar, opened his claws, and actually caught the light arrow in his hands. Then he suddenly clawed the light arrow, and in an instant, the light arrow was directly crushed into powder. This exchange was simply fast to the extreme. Many profound life-stage people were simply unable to clearly see what had happened. They could only continuously replay it in their minds in order to barely understand what had happened. Both parties did not show any mercy from the start. They were completely focused on killing each other from the start. Fast, so fast. Some people could not help but break out in a cold sweat, especially those who were determined to obtain the entry token. At this time, when they saw Daewoo Heartbreaker's strength, they could not help but break out in a cold sweat. With this kind of speed, if it were them, they would most likely die very quickly. Disregarding everything else, just Daewoo Heartbreaker's arrow alone was enough to completely kill them. That kind of speed was too fast. Whether it was the speed of the attack or the speed of the arrow, it was simply beyond the limit. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed that someone could be so fast. Although martial artists who used bows and arrows were not good at close combat, in reality, as long as the opponent did not get close to them, it would be fine. This seemed to be an unsolvable problem, but in fact, it was the easiest problem to solve. However, the premise was that the speed of the attack had to be much faster than the opponent, and much faster, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. Only then could they block all the enemies within their range of attack. Both sides are fighting so fast. The bloodthirsty hunters of the werewolf race are indeed extraordinary. Originally, I only heard that these bloodthirsty hunters each walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. It can be said that they have done their best for the werewolf race and spent a lot of effort to kill who knows how many experts before they could be absorbed into the bloodthirsty hunters. Now, it seems that the rumors are true, and there is indeed such a possibility. Compared to the bloodthirsty hunters of the werewolf race, Daewoo Heartbreaker is the truly terrifying one. Did you see his attack? Just now. The entire city saw it. It clearly looked very slow, and it clearly looked like it was still in midair. But when I reacted, I found that the light arrow had almost pierced through the werewolf. This kind of mysterious technique is really worthy of being the successor of this generation of the Daewoo family. He is simply tyrannical. Yes, this is the unique shooting sun archery technique of the Daewoo family. It is said that the ancestor of the Daewoo family once relied on this technique to directly shoot down a big sun and achieve supreme prestige. He was the archer god of a generation. Many people couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Having cultivated to this level, how could they not know that even the sun in an ordinary world was a huge star? Even an ordinary expert of the profound life realm couldn't do anything to such a huge star. Not to mention if it was a big sun in the mysterious world, it was an extremely mysterious existence. To be able to shoot down a big sun, it was worthy of being the inheritance of the archer god. The Daewoo family could be said to have a profound inheritance. Using archery, this is very rare. Yi Shiwen rubbed his chin and thought curiously. To him, on a daily basis, he had seen all kinds of experts, but it was rare to see people who used archery. Although this kind of martial art was extremely powerful when practiced to the extreme, it also had a very big flaw. Therefore, very few people used it. But once they met someone who used it, they were usually an extremely powerful expert. But speaking of which, this Daewoo Qingxin is indeed someone who has never been defeated. Yesterday, an expert of the profound death realm was actually defeated by him. That's right. Although his cultivation was suppressed to the profound death realm, regardless of martial arts comprehension or realm, it is far from what the profound death realm can compare with. But in the end, he was forced into an extremely difficult situation by Daewoo Qingxin. In the end, he had no choice but to break the seal and release the power that was originally sealed. Only then could he admit defeat. Someone nodded and said, obviously, they all approved of Daewoo Qingxin. He was defeated by Daewoo Qingxin after suppressing his cultivation at the profound death realm. This is amazing, Yi Shiwen couldn't help but say. Everyone knew that every step in the profound death realm was like reaching the heavens. Even the weakest existence in the profound death realm was much stronger than a famous profound death realm expert. Even if one's cultivation was suppressed, one's realm and martial Tao comprehension was not something that could be suppressed. Therefore, even in a situation where the strength of a middle profound death stage expert was similar, he would often be able to suppress his opponent without any suspense. It was already very difficult to fight to a draw, let alone being defeated by Daewoo Qingxin. This was not something that an ordinary person could do. This Diwu Qingxin was probably much stronger than he had originally predicted. Yi Shiwen, he will be your opponent. Moreover, he is very strong. After a long time, Hua Minghan finally opened her mouth and said. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. Ah, this is interesting. If I don't even have a strong opponent, wouldn't it be a little too boring? Yi Shiwen said indifferently. Facing such a strong opponent was also a good thing for him. Only by having a strong opponent could he improve and not dare to be careless in the slightest. I will fight all the strong opponents one by one and completely defeat them one by one, Yi Shiwen said with narrowed eyes. Hua Minghan nodded her head at the side, as if this was something natural. This was her man. He should have such a domineering tone. Defeat them one by one? What a joke. Do you know what kind of existence they are? How dare you say such shameless words as defeating all of them? Yi Shiwen had just finished speaking when a skinny old man behind him suddenly sneered in disdain. Although everyone's attention seemed to be attracted by Diwu Qingxin and that werewolf, because he was close to them, he could not help but sneer when he heard these words. What did this human say? He actually wants to defeat Diwu Qingxin and the others? How is this possible? He is really arrogant. Yes, I have not seen such an arrogant human in a long time. This is really funny. This is the funniest joke I have heard this year. What do you mean by overestimating one's capabilities? This is overestimating one's capabilities. What do you mean by a frog at the bottom of a well? This is a frog at the bottom of a well. He actually wants to defeat Diwu Qingxin and the others? How is this possible? Countless voices of ridicule came into his ears. For them, Diwu Qingxin's strength was something that even they had to admit. In the same level, it was almost impossible for anyone to defeat Diwu Qingxin. Not to mention, there were many people like Diwu Qingxin who were all famous existences in the world. This person actually said that he wanted to defeat them all. How is this possible? Yi Shiwen simply didn't want to pay attention to these people. Even if they were powerful to such an extent, their thinking was fixed. Who could be defeated, who couldn't be provoked, and who could be classified into different categories. Yi Shiwen didn't want to pay attention to these people. But for Yi Shiwen, such classification did not exist at all. For him, as long as they stood on the path of his cultivation, he would defeat them one by one, without exception. They quickly realized that Yi Shiwen did not care about them at all. They could not help but turn red with anger. Yi Shiwen did not plan to bother with them at all. Didn't this make them look like jumping clowns, jumping up and down? Now it seemed that it was true. Diwu Qingxin did not say anything, but they insisted on standing up for him. If they were not jumping clowns, then what were they? They could not help but be angry. But in the entire Luoyuan city, even they did not dare to be presumptuous. The nameless Tao College had existed for an incomparably long time. Not to mention that all the famous peerless experts came from the nameless Tao College. Even their sects, families, and forces might have one or more ancestors who came from the nameless Tao College. Facing such a mysterious behemoth, who would dare to be presumptuous? If they broke the rules and were killed by the experts of the nameless Tao College, their sects and families would definitely not dare to say anything. They could only swallow their pride. I want to see how an arrogant human like you can defeat those people. The skinny old man could not help but snort angrily. But there was no other way. Yi Shiwen did not care at all about what they were saying. His ears were like a filter, directly filtering out their words. But very soon, he was completely attracted by the battle in the field. At this time, after the first round of fighting, both sides had found out some details about each other. The second round of fighting was even crazier, like a storm directly sweeping out. But this time, it was the bloodthirsty hunter of the werewolf clan who had the upper hand from beginning to end. His attacks were like a tide, constantly tearing through the blood-red light. He surrounded Diwu Qingxin, or rather, trapped him in a very small area. Although the power of the light arrows was greatly increased at close range, at the same time, the suddenness was greatly reduced. Under the tyrannical strength of the werewolf clan, the light arrows seemed to be constantly retreating. This werewolf is about to lose. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen said faintly. Chapter 1938. This werewolf is going to lose. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen said faintly. Before Yi Shiwen's voice fell, he heard the old man's owl-like, hoarse, and unpleasant laughter. Ha, this is too funny. Human boy, I see that you change your words too quickly. Is it true? Is it because of Diwu hard-hearted strength that you don't dare to say it? The old man said with a sinister smile. Diwu hard-hearted strength is indeed not bad, but this werewolf's strength is probably much stronger than his. Yes, the bloodthirsty hunter has the advantage now. How do you know that the bloodthirsty hunter is going to lose? As soon as the old man finished speaking, many people chimed in. To them, they didn't have a good impression of this human kid who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Yes, it's ridiculous. Now both sides are evenly matched, and Diwu hard-hearted is restricted. No matter what, it is impossible for him to see that the bloodthirsty hunter is going to lose. Yes, the bloodthirsty hunter is stronger. And most importantly, although Diwu hard-hearted son's shooting archery is good, as long as it is not a direct confrontation, it should be impossible for him to lose. Everyone began to mock. Although they could not see who would win in the end, who told this hateful boy to say that the bloodthirsty hunter was going to lose. Naturally, they would say why the bloodthirsty hunter was going to lose. In fact, this was very possible. The strength of both sides could be said to be exceedingly high. Because of this, it was possible for either of them to win. To them, this was like a gamble. They were betting on who would win. Yi Shiwen's mouth flashed a disdainful smile, and then said, "Summer insects cannot talk about ice. I have nothing to say to idiots like you." "What? You dare to say that we are idiots? Little bastard, I think you don't want to live anymore. You are seeking death." When these people heard Yi Shiwen's words, they suddenly burst into an uproar. It was as if an uncle could endure it, but an aunt couldn't. They had originally regarded this guy as a joke who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. However, this guy, whom they regarded as a joke, had looked down on him. This was simply a disdain that touched their reverse scale. "Oh, I understand. You mean..." Hua Menghan suddenly reacted. Although she did not react as quickly as Yi Shiwen, she still reacted immediately. "Yes, that's it. That Diwu hard-hearted seems to be suppressed in a corner. But if you look closely, you can see that Diwu hard-hearted is shooting arrows faster." Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said, "This doesn't mean anything. It is precisely because the shooting frequency has increased that the power of each arrow has decreased to a limit. As long as the bloodthirsty hunter is careful, he cannot threaten the bloodthirsty hunter at all. This proves that Diwu hard-hearted has lost his footing under the threat of the bloodthirsty hunter, isn't it?" The skinny old man sneered disdainfully and said, although he suddenly felt that Yi Shiwen might be right, but he soon found a new theoretical basis. This was also very possible. After all, no one was the two of them, so any situation was very possible. The higher the shooting frequency, the same power also decreased at an alarming rate. Slowly, as long as the bloodthirsty hunter was careful, it would be almost no threat. Bang! The light arrow directly hit the bloodthirsty hunter's head, but it couldn't penetrate its fur at all. It could only hit the bloodthirsty hunter's head once, and then it suddenly turned into a sky full of light spots, as if it was formed and scattered like stars in the sky. "Is this all you've got? Diwu hard-hearted, I originally admired your Diwu family's shooting sun archery very much, but now it seems that it is only so." The bloodthirsty hunter sneered, as if he was not affected by this arrow at all. The cultivation of this body was simply tyrannical to the point that it was terrifying. It was completely an indestructible body. Although this light arrow was shot in a hurry, this bloodthirsty hunter's tyrannical body could not be denied. Many people could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Think about it, if it was them, it was very likely that they would be pierced on the spot. At the very least, they would be seriously injured. But it was simply impossible for this bloodthirsty hunter to be unscathed like this. See, kid who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. This bloodthirsty hunter can be said to have walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. His combat experience is incomparably rich, and with such a tyrannical body, even Diwu hard-hearted cannot injure this bloodthirsty hunter unless it is a charged arrow. Seeing this scene, the old man could not help but feel more confident, and his tone became even more disdainful. Yes, if he can't even injure him, then this bloodthirsty hunter's failure is even more ridiculous. Really, we should not waste time with this human. This is simply a waste of our time. This human really thinks he is someone important. Many people's tone was even more disdainful. Obviously, they did not believe that such a tyrannical bloodthirsty hunter could be defeated. Diwu hard-hearted did not say much, but his expression became even more focused. His 5 fingers pinched into the void, and a handful of light arrows flew into the void. Like a meteor dragging a tail, they swept through the air towards the bloodthirsty hunter, trying to seal off his surroundings. Such a counterattack could not be said to be inaccurate, and could even be said to have grasped all the possible routes that the bloodthirsty hunter would take next. But it was useless. These light arrows fell on the body of the bloodthirsty hunter, but they did not have any effect. They could not break through the bloodthirsty hunter's defense, not even his muscles. Not the head, not the arm, not the thigh. Diwu hard-hearted muttered little by little, but his eyes became more resolute, and he continued to release light arrows one after another. Not the head, not the arm, not the thigh. Yi Shiwen muttered, and his eyes suddenly lit up. This was a brand new method of fighting. Was he testing the opponent bit by bit? This was using the moves to the extreme, and it could be said to be a completely different approach from his usual open fighting method, but it was also based on his experience. He simply ignored those people's sarcasm, but Hua Minghan could not stand it, and wanted to teach those guys a lesson several times, but was stopped by Yi Shiwen, as it was not necessary. Boy, what are you mumbling about? What head, arms, thighs? The old man had been paying attention to Yi Shiwen. This human boy was simply infuriating. He had never met a guy who didn't care about him and completely ignored him. He suddenly realized the head, the arm, the thigh. Weren't these the places where Diwu hard-hearted had shot the bloodthirsty hunter? Speaking of which, a bad thought suddenly flashed in his mind. Although he was angry, he was not an idiot, not to mention that to be able to cultivate to this level, which one of them was not a veteran of hundreds of battles. At his age, he did not know how many battles he had experienced, and his experience could be said to be very rich. Previously, there were only some clues, and there were no clues to connect them. Now that Yi Shiwen had mentioned it, he suddenly had a feeling of enlightenment. It was like a bolt out of the blue, a thunder that flattened the ground, instantly waking him up. He was just dissatisfied and disdainful of Yi Shiwen, but it was not that he was ignorant. Could it be? He suddenly raised his head and looked at the battlefield in shock. You finally reacted. That's right, the fact that you can still react shows that you are not completely stupid. Yi Shiwen said with a mocking smile. All the attacks just now were just Diwu hard-hearted probing the weakness of the bloodthirsty hunter. And once the weakness is found, the result is already decided. This bloodthirsty hunter will definitely lose, he said with narrowed eyes. He had almost guessed Diwu hard-hearted's thoughts in an instant. At this time, everyone came back to their senses. Listening to Yi Shiwen's words, it was really very possible. No matter how unwilling they were, they had to admit that what Yi Shiwen said was really possible. Impossible. The skinny old man couldn't help but grit his teeth and said. He couldn't admit that he had misjudged Yi Shiwen. In fact, if he had a normal mind, he might have already seen through it. However, he was completely blinded by Yi Shiwen's anger. As long as Yi Shiwen agreed to it, he would oppose it first. If this is probing the weakness, then tell me, where's the weakness of the bloodthirsty hunter? He could not help but glare at Yi Shiwen. He was considered quick-witted and immediately thought of the most crucial point. Yes, even if it is true, so what? Can it be found? Just now, Diwu hard-hearted's arrows have all been probed, but there is no weakness that can be exploited. Yes, this bloodthirsty hunter has already cultivated to the point where there is no weakness. Even if Diwu hard-hearted is just probing, it is impossible to find a weakness. The corner of Yi Shiwen's mouth twitched slightly, and he said lightly, no, in fact, that bloodthirsty hunter has a weakness, and it has already been discovered by Diwu hard-hearted. That is why I said that his defeat is certain. Chapter 1939. Weakness? Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. The skinny old man immediately shouted angrily. He had witnessed the entire battle just now. He believed that he would never make a mistake. It was impossible for there to be any weakness that could be exploited. Physique practitioners generally had a weak point, but at this point, how could there be any weak point that could be exploited? You have also discovered it. It is his chest. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said, the real weak point of this bloodthirsty hunter was his chest. He did not pay attention to the surprise of the skinny old man behind him. Impossible. The chest is the hardest part of his body. It's not like I didn't try just now. The skinny old man did not believe it at all. When he thought of this, he suddenly calmed down a lot. How could this be possible? They had seen the whole process just now. Even if there was a weak point, it could not be the chest. It could even be said that the chest was the strongest defensive point of his entire body. Yes, it is the strongest part of his body, but even so, didn't you notice it? All of his defensive moves can at least strengthen the chest position. Didn't you notice such an obvious action? Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. Indeed, if it was the strongest point, in theory, there should be no need to defend at all. However, the movements of the werewolf were all to protect his chest. It was conceivable that under this strongest point, there should be the weakest part hidden. In this regard, Yi Shiwen, who was also a practitioner of physique refining, almost immediately understood why. Before his tyrant body had reached the Deshang realm, there would always be a weakness. Even if the weakness was well hidden, there would still be a weakness. But after his tyrant body reached great success, there was not a single spot on his body that was not perfect. At that time, there would really be no weakness. However, with the degree of his physical body and the perfection of his deduced tyrant body technique, it was also rare. This werewolf was just born strong. It couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as Yi Shiwen, who had a plan and purpose to strengthen his physical body. The tyrannical tyrant body technique, the more he practiced, the more he could perceive it. The original creator of tyrant body technique was simply unimaginable to what extent his vision was broadened. Although he had only obtained a fragment of it, he was able to tell a thing or two from the first layer of the foundation. The old man felt as if he had been struck by lightning. As the saying goes, those closely involved can't see clearly. The fog in front of him seemed to have been gently pushed aside by Yi Shiwen. Although it was very hard to believe that the strongest point was actually the weakest point, but it was really possible. All of the people present were martial arts masters and could be called Wu Dao grandmasters. The more weak they were, the more they had to make up for it. It was not that they did not know that. However, she hadn't expected that Yi Shiwen would be able to see through just a few movements. This kind of eyesight was terrifying. So what? Even if that's his weakness, it's also his strongest point. How could Diwu Tian break it? The old man said stubbornly. So what if he saw through the weakness? Even if he saw through the weakness, it was hard to say whether he could exploit it. Moreover, this werewolf's chest was one of his strongest points. Diwu Heartbreak couldn't even shoot anywhere else, let alone his chest. No matter how he looked at it, it was impossible. Yes, what would you have done? Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said with a smile. Wife, if it were you, what would you have done? If it were him, with his fighting style, he would have been straightforward, using absolute tyrannical strength to sweep away everything. Burn him to death. Hua Menghan just said lightly, concisely, and clearly. Namingly fire was her biggest reliance. Although she didn't learn as many things as Yi Shiwen. In fact, if she truly specialized in one thing, she would be invincible. However, although he had already guessed the result, he didn't know the process. He only knew some information about Diwu Heartbreak on paper. In reality, what he knew was just the tip of the iceberg. This was also the key reason why he came to watch this time. At this moment, even Yi Shiwen did not have an answer. Everyone's gazes were firmly fixed on the arena, especially the skinny old man. He did not want to admit defeat to Yi Shiwen. Admitting defeat to such a fellow was simply a great humiliation. even though he had originally thought highly of Daewoo Hard-Hearted. After all, Daewoo Hard-Hearted had defeated so many powerful experts, including powerful existences at the intermediate profound death stage who had suppressed their strength. At this moment, in order to prevent Yi Shiwen from gaining the upper hand, everything was worth it. But at this time, the initiative was not in his hands. Instead, it was in the hands of Daewoo Heartbreak. What would he do? But even he didn't realize that he had been completely influenced by Yi Shiwen. Unknowingly, he had already completely ignored the bloodthirsty hunter of the werewolf. In his heart, he had unknowingly accepted Yi Shiwen's judgment. The bloodthirsty hunter did have a weakness, and it was in the chest. So how would Daewoo Heartbreak defeat him? How would he defeat? Not whether he could defeat him. This subtle psychological change was not even noticed by him. No matter how much he hated Yi Shiwen, the result of Yi Shiwen's words was that even he began to believe in the result he said. On the battlefield, the battle between the two had already reached a white-hot stage. Because the entire arena had been fixed by the formation, including the space, it was impossible for the two to easily destroy the stars and void like they did outside. But it was also because of this that they relied more on moves and techniques. At this time, all of them were completely displayed. The battle between the two of them directly ignited a frenzy, sweeping out in circles. The two of them were like deities in this frenzy, frantically exchanging blows. Daewoo Heartbreak's light arrows became faster and faster. All the chi in his body turned into light arrows, continuously shooting out arrow after arrow. Whoosh! 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 Long arrows continuously shot out, like meteors breaking through the sky. Every arrow went straight for the chest of the bloodthirsty hunter of the werewolf. As Yi Shiwen expected, Daewoo Heartbreak had already discovered this weakness that was not a weakness. The reason why it was not a weakness was because it was a weakness, but also its strongest point. As long as he could break through it, he could instantly cause heavy damage to the bloodthirsty hunter of the werewolf. If he wanted to end the battle in a short time, this was undoubtedly the best way. Roar! 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 This bloodthirsty hunter of the werewolf continued to roar, waving his claws like the wind, constantly crushing the light arrows flying towards him. How could he not understand that his weakness had already been discovered? But this was not a problem. A weakness was a weakness, yes, but whether or not he could break through this weakness was not a problem. But this Daewoo Heartbreak was far more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. It was hard to imagine that at this age he could have such cultivation. Originally, he had also heard that Daewoo Heartbreak had invited all the heroes in the world to fight. As long as they were willing to suppress their strength to the same level as him, anyone could come and challenge him. He felt that this guy was too arrogant. Although their strength was the same, the difference in their levels was like heaven and earth, which meant that the combat power they could display was also like heaven and earth. This guy did not care at all. It was simply an insult to them. But when they actually fought, he discovered that this Daewoo Heartbreak was indeed extraordinary. To be able to obtain one of the 20 invitations, he was not ordinary, nor was it by luck. Roar, let me see how you plan to break through my weakness. This bloodthirsty hunter of the werewolf revealed a ferocious smile. It was cruel and bloody, as if he had seen his favorite prey. Who knew how many so-called geniuses he had slaughtered in his hands? Boom! He suddenly stomped on the ground, and the mountains shook as if there was an earthquake. At this time, he instantly disappeared in midair, and with the help of the rebounding force, he rushed out. His speed was so fast that he directly tore through the air, and there was a burst of extremely intense and sharp sound of breaking through the air. Daewoo Heartbreak's expression did not change. He was abnormally calm. Even when the situation was the most disadvantageous for him, there was no change in his expression. It was more like no one could make him move. It's time to end this," Daewoo Heartbreak said coldly. "What kind of joke is this? You think you can defeat me? Break for me and become my prey." The voice of the bloodthirsty hunter of the werewolf came from the void, but his figure did not appear. No one knew where he had gone. Sunset Arrow. Suddenly, Daewoo Heartbreak suddenly moved. He pulled his arm, and suddenly a long arrow appeared in his hand. Then he instantly flew forward. Boom! This long arrow spun rapidly and suddenly formed a huge energy storm. It grew bigger and bigger and suddenly exploded into the void. Just when everyone thought he had missed, this long arrow suddenly stopped in midair. In the void, a figure appeared. If it was not that bloodthirsty hunter of the werewolf, who else could it be? At this time, his chest had been completely pierced. He could not even stand steadily, and he half knelt down. The ferocious expression that was about to succeed still hung on his face, but at this time, it slowly expanded into an expression of shock. This is impossible. You actually hid your strength? That bloodthirsty hunter of the werewolf finally understood why he was so weak. Chapter 1940. From the beginning, Diwu's hard-hearted strength was not weak, so no one expected him to have hidden his strength. Or rather, he did not use his full strength at all, which was why Diwu's hard-hearted had succeeded. However, he knew that even if he had been on guard from the beginning, it was useless. The strength that Diwu's hard-hearted had displayed was far more tyrannical than he had imagined. His chest was his weakness, but it was also the place with the best defense. In the end, it was still broken through in one move. One could imagine how terrifying Diwu's hard-hearted was. It was far beyond ordinary people's imagination. Diwu's hard-hearted did not continue to kill. After all, it was only a spar. Defeating him was enough. Bang! The light arrows in the chest of the bloodthirsty werewolf instantly crumbled, turning into specks of light that filled the sky before disappearing. At the same time, the wound on the chest of the bloodthirsty werewolf also began to rapidly recover. This time, I admit defeat. Diwu's hard-hearted. If there is a chance in the future, I will challenge you again. The bloodthirsty werewolf said unwillingly. There will be a chance in the future? Diwu's hard-hearted said with a smirk. There won't be a chance in the future. I have gained quite a lot from today's battle. When I break into the profound death realm, you won't even be able to block a single finger of mine. You! The bloodthirsty werewolf's face suddenly stiffened. It was obvious that Diwu's hard-hearted did not take him seriously at all. However, there was nothing he could say. He might be able to fight against Diwu's hard-hearted now because he had a much longer cultivation history than Diwu's hard-hearted. However, after some time passed and Diwu's hard-hearted stepped into the intermediate profound death stage, there would be no basis for a fair fight between them. He clenched his fists unwillingly, but there was nothing he could do, because from a certain perspective, they were no longer the same thing. The people around Yi Shiwen were all looking at Yi Shiwen, not Diwu's hard-hearted. Compared to Diwu's hard-hearted's defeat of the bloodthirsty werewolf, Yi Shiwen had brought them a much greater shock. Yi Shiwen had guessed everything correctly. No, it was not completely correct, but at least 70 to 80% of it. It was almost as if he had seen the future and completely guessed Diwu's hard-hearted's actions. It was simply abnormal. They didn't even dare to imagine it. If they were facing a heaven stage martial artist, they might be able to figure out their movements through various signs. However, this was a peak early stage profound death stage expert. How could this be possible? It should even be said that this matter was a little scary no matter how one thought about it. Now, I'm going to carve my name on the tablet. Diwu's sadness didn't even look at the bloodthirsty werewolf hunter. Defeated enemies or opponents, to him, were already meaningless. The Holy Monument? Diwu's hard-hearted actually wants to challenge the Holy Monument? Many people suddenly burst into an uproar. Even Hua Minghan's complexion slightly changed. The Holy Monument? What is that? Yi Shiwen asked. It's a stone tablet set up in the 4 satellite cities of the nameless Dao College: Sky-Splitting, Sun-Chasing, Luoyue, and Jiaxing. There are a total of 100 names recorded on the stone tablet. Those who are able to leave their name on it are at least at the profound death stage. These are all the most outstanding disciples of the nameless Dao College. In these countless years, only 100 people have made it onto the list. As long as someone is on the list, it means that someone will be pushed off. Thus, for many people, these 100 names are equivalent to the strongest. Compared to the value of the stone tablet, even the invitation from the nameless Dao College is nothing. Hua Minghan said slowly. In these countless years, there have only been those 100 people. But if it's the strongest 100 people in the history of the nameless Tao College, I'm afraid there will be no lack of myth realm figures among them. How can Diwu hard-hearted challenge them? Yishuan asked. Because this has nothing to do with strength. On the contrary, within the same realm, the stronger one is the higher the ranking. Generally speaking, every time the nameless Tao College opens, only a few people can make it into the top 100. As for the top 50 people, there hasn't been any change in the past 10 million years. The last person who broke the rules and made it into the top 50 was the leader of the Divine Union several thousand years ago. Hua Minghan said slowly. Yi Shiwen immediately understood what Hua Minghan meant. Those who could truly make it onto the list were all existences whose strength had soared to the pinnacle of a certain realm. This didn't mean that they were already invincible when they inscribed their name on the stone tablet. Even the current myth realm leader couldn't have been as powerful as he was now back then. He must have gone through a process of getting stronger. Although this wasn't a true ranking of strength, it was equivalent to a ranking of the strongest talents. Any one of them, even if they were at the bottom, would be an invincible existence in the vast history of the mysterious world. Hearing this, Yishuan couldn't help but feel his blood boil. If he could make it onto the stone tablet, his glory would be remembered for all eternity. But he shouldn't be challenging the overall ranking. Hua Minghan said. What's the difference? Yishuan asked. Of course. The names recorded on the overall ranking are the most outstanding and dazzling geniuses of the past countless years. Even in the vast river of history, they won't be obliterated by the turbulent waves of history. Instead, they will become even more dazzling. Apart from the overall ranking, there is another ranking list. This ranking list records the names of the powerhouses of each batch of the Nameless Tao College opens. When the next batch of the Nameless Tao College opens, the names of the current batch will be erased. The previous batch's first place on the stone tablet was none other than the leader of the Divine Union. Hua Minghan said, the Nameless Tao College only accepts 100 people in total. Doesn't that mean that everyone can be on the list? Yishuan asked. Of course not. In fact, it's not only those who have obtained the entry medallion who can leave their names on the Nameless Tao Academy. Everyone else can as well. You should know that every time the Nameless Tao Academy opens, countless geniuses will come, and not just the 100. Some of them are too old and miss the chance to enter the Nameless Tao Academy, while others are not strong enough. There are also some who have missed their chance to enter the Nameless Tao Academy, while others are not strong enough. In any case, if those who can leave their names on the newcomer stone stele are the strongest of their generation and level, then the overall ranking stone stele can be said to be the strongest since ancient times. In fact, those who can make it into the top 50, aside from a portion of them who perish midway, more than half of them have already entered the immortal realm. In other words, just the Nameless Tao Academy's ranking stone stele alone has produced 20 immortal gods. That's why it's not just the mystic world, but even the colossal forces of other worlds will send their outstanding disciples here. It's because this place can help them advance further into the mythical realm, and even further to prove their Tao, Hua Minghan said with a strong desire in her words. In terms of reputation, she was even more famous than Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen could understand what 20 immortal gods meant. Even if it was just a tiny bit of friendship, perhaps no one would dare to lay a hand on the Nameless Tao College. Moreover, the Nameless Tao College itself represented an incomparably terrifying inheritance that had not been broken for countless years. Yi Shiwen understood very well what this meant. Moreover, as more and more people entered the immortal realm, more and more people were willing to send their disciples to the Nameless Tao College. A god could support an immortal inheritance, 20 immortal inheritances, and countless mythical figures. He understood better than anyone what this meant. This Nameless Tao College was more powerful and terrifying than he had imagined. But this has nothing to do with us, Hua Minghan said with a sweet smile. Yes, why not? Don't you want to engrave your name on it? Yi Shiwen said with a smile. Haha, if both of us engrave our names on it, wouldn't it be a wonderful story that will be passed down for eternity? Hua Minghan rolled her eyes at Yi Shiwen. Sometimes Yi Shiwen was very calm, but sometimes he was very flamboyant, just like a naive child. But it was precisely because he was so unpredictable that she couldn't forget him. At this moment, the face of the skinny old man behind Yi Shiwen twitched twice. He wanted to say a few words of mockery, but when he thought of what had happened just now, his face couldn't help but turn ugly. Not only had he not been able to mock Yi Shiwen, but he had also been mocked by Yi Shiwen. Reality had ruthlessly slapped him in the face. It was simply humiliating. In the end, he opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. He was completely frightened by Yi Shiwen's gaze that was as precise as a scalpel. In the distance, Diwu's sadness was just about to leave when he suddenly stopped. His gaze was as sharp as a blade as it swept towards Yi Shiwen and Yi Shiwen. "You two, tell me your names. I am somewhat interested in the two of you," Diwu Heartbreak said indifferently. Everyone's gazes suddenly focused on Yi Shiwen and Hua Menghan. Originally, only the people near Yi Shiwen knew that these two were not ordinary, but because of Diwu Heartbreak's words, everyone's gazes suddenly focused on them. Everyone's gazes were like sharp blades as they swept over him. They all seemed to want to know what was so special about this person that made Diwu Hearthearted think so highly of him. Diwu Heartbreak had only been here for a little more than a month, but his name had already spread through the streets and alleys. Because of his arrogance, ordinary people were not worthy of being remembered by him. It had nothing to do with cultivation. Cultivation was only temporary, but there were endless possibilities in the future. My name? Remember, I am Yi Shiwen. Chapter 1941. Since Diwu's sadness had already spoken, how could he show weakness? Yi Shiwen, he's actually Yi Shiwen. Suddenly, the crowd burst into an uproar. During this period of time, regardless of whether it was the slaughter of the three divine union elders at the peak of the early stage profound death realm or the replacement invitation, he had been placed in the eye of the storm. Those who could come here were all interested in the nameless Tao College's entry token. How could they not have heard of his name? No wonder even Diwu Hearthearted thinks so highly of him. Everyone had a feeling of realization. He's Yi Shiwen? I don't think he's that great. Why did the people from the nameless Tao College give him a replacement invitation? Could he be the illegitimate son of an elder from the nameless Tao College? Someone speculated maliciously. At this moment, the face of the skinny old man behind Yi Shiwen twitched continuously. No wonder his eyes were so accurate. This was not without reason. Yi Shiwen, he's actually Yi Shiwen. Even if he was unwilling to admit it, he had to admit that this young man was not simple. There was originally a trace of unwillingness in his heart, but at this moment, it could only vanish into thin air. Although his strength wasn't too far off compared to this young genius with a boundless future, people like him were no different from burning candles. They looked very bright, but in fact, they didn't have many days left to burn. They could not be mentioned in the same breath. He was extremely envious. He had never been so envious before. If he was still young, perhaps he would still have the heart to compete with these people. However, his countless years of experience told him that they might be geniuses in other places, but in the mysterious world where countless geniuses gathered, they were nothing. Yi Shiwen? I will remember this name. What about you? Diwu's sadness asked with interest. Hua Menghan? Hua Menghan gently opened her red lips and spat out these three words. Suddenly, there was another commotion in the crowd. Another famous name had appeared in the world. It was different from the nouveau riche like Yi Shiwen. Hua Menghan had been famous for more than 100 years. The name of the celestial phoenix maiden had already spread throughout the heavens and 10,000 worlds. Interesting. Both of you are qualified to be my opponents. I originally wanted to have a good fight with you, but now I am in peak condition. I will go to the stone tablet and leave my name. Yi Shiwen, do you dare to have a fight with me after 3 months? Yi Shiwen looked at Yi Shiwen. Diwu's sadness said. Although he also wanted to fight with Yi Shiwen immediately, he was currently at the peak of the early profound death realm. His condition could be said to be at the peak. If he waited until he reached the intermediate profound death realm, he might not even have the qualification to enter the newcomer's stone tablet. Why wouldn't I dare? Yi Shiwen responded. He felt as if his entire body was boiling with excitement as he watched such a battle. Then wait and see. 3 months from now, I will fight you here. At that time, I hope you won't disappoint me. Diwu hard-hearted smiled slightly. Then, he took a step and instantly disappeared in front of everyone. Not long after Diwu hard-hearted left, Yi Shiwen and Hua Minghan did not linger and immediately left. However, for the crowd, the commotion had just begun. Oh my God! Are all these geniuses going to gather? First it was Diwu hard-hearted, then it was Yi Shiwen and Hua Minghan. These famous geniuses are finally going to gather and form a golden era? Ha ha ha, this is going to be a good show. Although Diwu hard-hearted has defeated some experts before, how could he be compared to Yi Shiwen? There is also Hua Minghan and the Celestial Phoenix Maiden. Didn't they say that the ancient Phoenix realm is looking for her everywhere? I'm afraid it won't be long before they come. When that time comes, I'm afraid it will be another battle. Let's not talk about Hua Minghan. It's hard to say whether the ancient Phoenix realm has the intention to deal with Hua Minghan. However, the Divine Union can't wait to tear Yi Shiwen to shreds. That's for sure. It seems like things are getting more interesting. It was a good thing for them to have a good show to watch. This matter spread over time. The duel between Diwu hard-hearted, who had never been defeated among those of the same level, and Yi Shiwen, who had recently risen to prominence, would definitely become the most important matter in the Luoyue city in the next few months. No one knew how many spies from the various great forces had gathered in the Luoyue city. The arranged duel between the two had also quickly spread to the ears of these great forces. Not to mention that they already possessed the strength of peerless experts. Just their future potential was enough to make people take them seriously. They might not even need 1,000 years to become peerless experts and legendary figures whose names would shake the heavens and the realms. Just as everyone was discussing this, Yi Shiwen had already found a place to stay. Even if it was a place where experts gathered as a profound death realm expert, he would still be able to have his own independent place. In 3 months' time, he would have a duel with Diwu hard-hearted. He could not afford to lose this duel. Furthermore, no matter what he said, Diwu hard-hearted had indeed given him a lot of pressure. That powerful arrow had left an extremely deep impression on him. If it was a duel now, he would not be afraid. However, if Diwu hard-hearted entered the intermediate profound death realm in 3 months' time, he would definitely be defeated. Hence, the only way was for him to enter the intermediate profound death realm as well. That way, no matter how much Diwu hard-hearted's strength improved, he would not be able to escape Yi Shiwen's grasp and escape his control. Fortunately, he had already entered the peak of the initial profound death realm. 3 months' time should be enough for him to enter the intermediate profound death realm. However, before he could take a break, someone had already come knocking on his door, almost in the blink of an eye. It was a person completely covered in a cloak. He claimed to be an envoy from the nameless Dao College. Yi Shiwen, Hua Minghan, the two of you can only stay in Luoyue City for a total of 1 month. After 1 month, no matter what, you must leave. The next time you return to Luoyue City will be at least 2 months later. After saying this, the emissary floated away. Yi Shiwen could not help but feel extremely depressed. There was actually such a rule. It was simply insane. In this 1 month's time, he could be considered to have truly witnessed how unscrupulous these people were in order to compete for the entry token. In order to obtain the entry token, they were practically crazy. Or rather, in order to obtain the opportunity to enter the nameless Dao College to study, they were already crazy. For the various major forces in the Xian world, only by experiencing the baptism of the nameless Dao College would they truly have the qualifications to compete for the Dao in the future. As long as it was a force that was slightly above the threshold, they would not let go of such a good opportunity. During this past month, he could be said to have suffered all sorts of hardships. He'd fled in a sorry state on several occasions, and he'd almost lost his life. Those old fellows didn't care if you were a junior or not. For the sake of obtaining a position command token, they'd simply stop at nothing. They were a complete group of madmen. Originally, he thought that entering Luoyue City would allow him to obtain the protection of the nameless Dao College. In that case, he would be able to take a breather. Once the nameless Tao College opened, everything would be better. But now, the people of the nameless Tao College wanted him to leave Luoyue City. This was equivalent to pushing them into the tiger's mouth like a tiger watching its prey. Deranged, simply deranged. After all, he was not like Diwu Hard-Hearted, who had the backing of a Diwu clan and the immortal inheritance of a deity. Even so, there was no guarantee that Diwu Hard-Hearted would not be attacked from behind, let alone him. It was almost certain that the moment he stepped out, he would be targeted by many people with ill intentions. When that time came, there would definitely be endless trouble, not to mention the possibility of other powerful existences launching sneak attacks. At this time, he regretted it. If he had known earlier, he would not have been so high-profile. He originally thought that Luoyue City was very safe. Except in the martial arts arena, people were not allowed to fight casually. Otherwise, it would be challenging the prestige of the nameless Tao College, which was no different from seeking death. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, the nameless Tao College, which he had placed high hopes on, would give him a super huge sneak attack? This sneak attack directly made him dizzy, and he almost fainted. Hua Minghan couldn't help but laugh foolishly when she saw Yi Shiwen's distressed look. She didn't know when it had happened, but looking at his helpless and deflated appearance had become a source of amusement in her heart. She was different from Yi Shiwen. Over the past 100 years, under the nurturing of the Phoenix King, not only had her strength increased, but her vision and knowledge had also become incomparably broad. How could she not know about the rules of Luoyue City? It was just that she had just come out of closed-door training and had actually forgotten to remind Yi Shiwen. What an insane rule. It's simply insane. He finally understood why the nameless Tao College only recruited a mere 100 disciples. Under such cruel rules, either one was extremely powerful, had incomparable influence, or really had great luck. Otherwise, it was impossible to keep the quota token in their hands. After such a few purges, there was no doubt that the remaining people were the elites and top talents of this era. It was impossible for there to be anyone who was lucky. All of them were people who excelled in a certain aspect, and those who walked at the forefront of this era were as rare as phoenix feathers and Chilan horns. However, before he could recover from the depression of being sneak attacked, trouble had already come looking for him. Chapter 1942. Yi Shiwen had yet to digest the sneak attack from the nameless Tao College. At this moment, trouble had already arrived. Many people marveled at Yi Shiwen's strength and reputation. However, it did not mean that everyone thought the same. In the eyes of many, Yi Shiwen, who did not have a strong backing, was a pushover. The strength of an early-stage profound death stage was not strong enough to make them feel apprehensive. Boom! An incomparably dreadful, imposing aura instantly crushed down and completely enveloped the courtyard where Yi Shiwen was standing. Who's there? In the face of such a serious provocation, it was impossible for Yi Shiwen to not react. Immediately, the imposing aura on his body reacted almost instinctively. Like a sharp blade, it instantly broke through the imposing aura and soared into the sky. Hua Minghan also reacted in an instant. The incomparably powerful Nanming Li fire on her body surged in an instant, causing the surrounding temperature to rise. If not for the fact that the two of them knew that no one here would dare to challenge the dignity of the nameless Tao College, they would have retaliated on the spot. The person who had come to the nameless Tao College had used his aura to open a path and envelop them. This was no longer a simple provocation. Just as the two of them finished speaking, a figure directly floated down. It was an old man in a black robe. Although he looked a little old, his eyes were full of vigor and overbearing. Compared to the eyes of a young man, they were even sharper and more threatening. Yi Shiwen's pupils suddenly shrank when he saw the insignia on the shoulder of this old man. He was from the Heaven Wasteland Palace. If there were a few forces that he had offended in the profound world, the Divine Alliance would undoubtedly be ranked first. He had killed quite a few profound death realm experts and dozens of profound life realm experts from the Divine Alliance. This was enough to make the Divine Alliance's hearts ache. It was not surprising that the Divine Union wanted to tear him into pieces. Besides the divine union, the Heaven Wasteland Palace ranked second in Yi Shiwen's heart. Although not many people knew about this, he knew that the experts of the Heaven Wasteland Palace that he had killed back in the ancient desolation could become explosives that could explode at any time. At that time, he was not very clear about how powerful the Heaven Desolate Hall was. It should be said that he had no way out after reaching that level. If he did not kill all of them, they would destroy the entire human race. He had no other choice. However, he also knew about this matter. He could hide it for a while, but he could not hide it forever. Quite a few profound life-tier experts had died, and they were not heaven-tier martial artists. Every year they could die in various worlds. The death of any expert of that level was something that these powers would definitely investigate. It was impossible for them to give up. There were too many witnesses at that time, so it was impossible for him to sew everyone's mouth shut. In other words, it was only a matter of time before he was exposed. Therefore, even though the Heaven Desolate Hall did not target him in the profound world, he still regarded them as his number 2 enemy. It was just that he had never revealed it on his face. Now that the Heaven Wasteland Hall was the first to arrive, Yi Shiwen had a bad premonition in his heart. The black-clothed old man had an arrogant look on his face as he indifferently glanced at Yi Shiwen and said, "Yi Shiwen, don't tell me you don't have anything to say to our Heaven Wasteland Palace?" Explanation? What do I need to explain? Yi Shiwen asked. "Humph. Did you really think that I came empty-handed this time? We have already investigated clearly. You were the one who killed our elders in the ancient desolate realm. Do you still want to deny it?" The black-clothed old man coldly said. Yi Shiwen was startled. Sure enough, he had been investigated. However, he wasn't flustered. This was something that he had already expected. It was just a matter of a little earlier or a little later. It didn't make any difference to him. "Yeah, so what? If I didn't kill them back then, would you have let me go?" Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. "We don't care what happened back then. We only know that you have indeed killed a member of our Heaven Wasteland Palace. Do you know what kind of crime that is?" He coldly glanced at Yi Shiwen and said, "Crime? I don't think it's a crime. You guys are too overbearing. I'm merely self-destructed. If it wasn't for your Heaven Wasteland Palace being overbearing, things wouldn't have turned out like that." Yi Shiwen said, "Killing a member of our Heaven Wasteland Palace is a heinous crime. Even if they are in the wrong, others cannot interfere. Our Heaven Wasteland Palace naturally has our own rules. It's not up to you to comment." The black-clothed old man coldly said, "What an overbearing rule. Others don't even have the qualifications to comment on your matters?" Hua Menghan opened her mouth and said, "Hua Menghan, this is just an invitation. It has nothing to do with you. Therefore, you better not get involved. This is not something you can participate in. If you say that our Heaven Wasteland Palace is overbearing, then your ancient Phoenix realm will only be more overbearing." The black-clothed old man saw that Hua Menghan had the intention to intervene and immediately warned her. "If that's the case, then what else is there to say? Don't tell me you plan to fight me here?" Yi Shiwen said with a mocking expression. He wanted to see if the Heaven Wasteland Palace would dare to ignore the dignity of the nameless Tao College and attack here. If that was the case, he might be able to use the nameless Tao College to eradicate this powerful enemy. The black-clothed old man narrowed his eyes and paused for a moment before saying, "Yi Shiwen, although you have committed a heinous crime, the heavens are merciful. We intend to give you a chance." A chance? Within Yi Shiwen's body, Zhen Yuan secretly rose. Although he believed that this black-clothed old man wouldn't dare to provoke the prestige of the nameless Tao College, nothing was certain. Therefore, he wouldn't pin his hopes on this kind of thing. He still needed to be vigilant and careful. "That's right. I know that you have an invitation in your hands. As long as you hand over the invitation, the grievances between you and the Heaven Wasteland Palace will be written off. You have already thoroughly offended the Divine Union, but the Heaven Wasteland Palace is not afraid of the Divine Union. If you are willing to submit, we are willing to protect you. Even the Divine Union will not be able to do anything to you." The black-clothed old man said word by word with a condescending expression, as if he was giving charity to Yi Shiwen. In his opinion, he had already thoroughly offended the Divine Union and the Cloud Beyond City. Therefore, he should be thinking of ways to grab the olive branch extended by the Heaven Wasteland Palace. Offending these two great forces was equivalent to courting death. If the Heaven Wasteland Palace was added to the mix, then he would practically be sentenced to death. Anyone with a little brain would be able to understand what to choose. However, what he did not expect was that Yi Shiwen only smiled contemptuously and said, "This is the heinous crime that you mentioned." It turns out that a heinous crime can be written off with an invitation. What a joke! The black-clothed old man's expression was somewhat ugly, but he still said they should feel honored to be able to contribute to the Heaven Wasteland Palace. Yi Shiwen, this is your only chance to live. As far as I know, the leader of the Divine Union has already rushed to the Profound Realm battlefield. Although he is still in a mysterious space and cannot free himself to deal with you, as long as you are still in the Profound Realm battlefield, this is inevitable. Without the protection of the Heaven Wasteland Palace, you can only wait to die. So, what's your answer? He stared intently at Yi Shiwen. I don't agree, Yi Shiwen said word by word. Although logically speaking, what the black-clothed old man said was the choice that most people would make, it just so happened that Yi Shiwen was not such a person who would take the ordinary path. How dare you? The black-clothed old man immediately flew into a rage. The terrifying strength of the late Profound Death Realm came crashing down endlessly. It was like the most terrifying wave in the world that instantly crushed Yi Shiwen's body. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt that his whole body had sunk. A dreadful power had completely crushed him. It was like a mountain or a sea, and it was pouring down in torrents. The golden light on his body surged in an instant, and in an instant, it turned into a sharp sword and slashed out. Golden spears and armored horses, conquering the heavens. The black-clothed old man had never thought that Yi Shiwen would actually reject his suggestion. This was completely unexpected. In his opinion, their request was as reasonable as it could be. It was simply benevolent and lenient. They could even let go of Yi Shiwen's heinous crime. However, such a reasonable request had actually been rejected in an instant. This was simply crazy. I think you are tired of living. The black-clothed old man was filled with a murderous aura. His clothes fluttered and fluttered under his anger. Do you think the nameless Tao Academy can protect you? When the month is over, you will be driven out of Moonfall City. At that time, there will be countless people waiting for you to come to us. How dare you refuse our kindness? You must have lost your mind. Kindness? Do you think this is kindness? I don't want this kind of kindness. Yi Shiwen smiled faintly, a hint of disdain at the corner of his mouth. As for those who have designs on me, you don't need to worry about them. I want to see how many lives they have. Yi Shiwen's eyes sharpened, and his expression became even colder. The black-clothed old man's aura was unable to suppress Yi Shiwen. On the contrary, he continued to resist. Humph. You have guts. I'll see how you die in a month. The old man's eyes were filled with bewilderment. In the end, he did not dare to make a move in the city. However, his killing intent had already been set. He had already sentenced Yi Shiwen to death. Yi Shiwen must die. Chapter 1943. Humph. You have guts. I'll see how you die in a month. The black-clothed old man didn't even bother to say anything else after leaving these ruthless words. He flicked his sleeves and left. Yi Shiwen, although his words are a bit arrogant, there is one thing that he is right about. The Divine Union is currently unable to deal with you, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to do so. I'm afraid that you will soon face the intense retaliation of the Divine Union if you don't have the protection of the Heaven Wasteland Palace. Huang Minghan said, They don't have any good intentions. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said, They are not trustworthy. Moreover, they are willing to betray someone who has risked his life for them for so many years just for an invitation. If the Divine Union can afford it one day, I'm afraid that they will personally cut off my head in exchange for the reward. Yi Shiwen understood. The behavior of the people of the Heaven Wasteland Palace made him feel even more bitterly disappointed. In their opinion, perhaps it was a matter of course to return the invitation. However, in his opinion, It was incomparably bitterly disappointing. In the eyes of those higher-ups, he was probably just a chess piece. A chess piece that could be abandoned at any time. Those who had followed them for so many years could be abandoned just for a trifling invitation, let alone him. However, he also understood that a trifling invitation was an opportunity for those people to change their fate. Perhaps it was the only opportunity for them to prove their Tao in this lifetime. They had already cultivated to the profound realm, and were only one step away from the legendary Tao corroboration. Now that they had such an opportunity, as long as there was a little chance, they would not let it go. It was by constantly seizing every opportunity that they had today that they could achieve their current cultivation. This invitation card was just an invitation card for Yi Shiwen. However, it wasn't the same for other people. However, even if he understood, he absolutely could not agree with such an approach. Moreover, the person who might be abandoned the next time would be him. Yes, he definitely doesn't have any good intentions. However, it is very likely that the first thing we will face when we leave the city in a month's time will be their surprise attack. Hua Minghan said. She was simply too familiar with the style of these big forces. Yes. Yi Shiwen nodded. This was just as he had guessed. How could they be willing to give up without achieving their goal? When we leave, we will face a continuous stream of surprise attacks. Hua Minghan also had a rare look of worry on her face. Even with her self-confidence, she could not guarantee that she would be able to withstand the countless attacks that would follow. This was the most terrifying trial of the nameless Tao College. There was no need for them to take action personally. Just a simple rule was enough to make one face the most terrifying trial. It was unknown how many people had been knocked unconscious by this rule. Since ancient times, countless geniuses had fallen to this rule. Unless he was willing to give up, it was almost inevitable that he would face an endless pursuit. You will separate from me after a month. They won't dare to kill you as long as Phoenix King doesn't open her mouth. So, no one should make things difficult for you if you leave alone. Yi Shiwen said. No. How can I leave you alone at this time? Hua Minghan said immediately. That would be for the best. You know what kind of existences will attack when the time comes. You won't be able to help much even if you stay here for a few more months. Yi Shiwen's words were like a sharp knife stabbing into her heart. However, she also understood that Yi Shiwen was only saying that to give it a try. Although her strength was considered top-notch amongst the younger generation, there was still a huge gap between her and those experts who were at the late profound death stage, or even the peak profound death stage. Don't worry. Yi Shiwen caressed her fair face and smiled. With my speed, as long as I'm careful, even late profound death stage experts won't be able to surround me. As long as I don't get surrounded on the spot, it won't be a problem for me to escape unscathed. Moreover, I will use all my strength to make a breakthrough in this 1 month. As long as I break through to the mid-profound death stage, I will be able to escape unscathed even in a direct confrontation. It won't be a big problem. They are still far from being able to kill me. Yes, Hua Minghan softly called out as she snuggled into his embrace. They had only been together for a short period of time, and now they had to separate again. Even if it wouldn't be long this time, she was still reluctant to part with him. Don't force yourself. Taking care of yourself is the most important thing. Even though he knew that every single one of them had experienced mountains and seas of blood and killed their way out, when it came to himself, he was still confused by his concern. Rationality was no longer important. Don't worry, your man is still quite strong. Those people who want my life can forget about it if they don't prepare to fill the fields with floating corpses. Yi Shiwen coldly laughed. If they wanted to kill, they would kill until blood flowed like a river. If they wanted to kill, they would kill until the heavens and earth turned dark. Therefore, the most important thing now is to step into the mid-profound death stage. As long as I step into the mid-profound death stage, I will at least have the ability to protect myself. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said, after stepping into the mid-profound death stage, his strength would experience an explosive growth. Naturally, it would be extraordinary and his chances of success would be much greater. You can do it. Hua Minghan rebuked. However, she stuck her head to Yi Shiwen's chest and was unwilling to move away for a long time. The news that the Heaven Desolate Palace had suffered a crushing defeat at Yi Shiwen's side had quickly spread. The reason why everything had been calm after Yi Shiwen had entered, and no one other than the people from the Heaven Desolate Palace had actually come to find trouble with him, was largely because the people from the Heaven Desolate Palace had spoken. Before Yi Shiwen had even arrived, the people from the Heaven Desolate Palace had already spread the word that Yi Shiwen had already been booked by them. Therefore, after Yi Shiwen's identity was exposed, even though many forces had the same thoughts, they did not take action. After all, not many people were willing to fight to the death with the Heaven Desolate Palace just for an invitation. Although the quota was important, it was not to the extent of starting a war with the Heaven Desolate Palace just for this quota. Just like the black-clothed old man, everyone felt that Yi Shiwen had no reason to refuse. He had already offended the people of the Divine Union. How could he still refuse the olive branch of the Heaven Desolate Palace? Although this good intention itself would require him to pay a huge price and cut off any possible future Dao validation path. Although it was not impossible to enter the nameless Dao College, most of the Dao validation experts in the Xian world were related to the nameless Dao College, so there was no difference. Even so, it was better than dying in battle. Even so, he still refused, and in such a straightforward manner, without even considering it. This was simply beyond everyone's expectations. Have you heard? Yi Shiwen actually refused the good intentions of the Heaven Desolate Palace. It is said that Elder Xian Ting's face was distorted with anger. Haha, don't talk about rumors. I saw it with my own eyes. He was indeed so angry that his face turned green. I guess he did not expect Yi Shiwen to actually refuse. However, Yi Shiwen is really arrogant. He has already offended the Divine Union, and it is said that he has a conflict with Cloud City, but he still has the guts to refuse the Heaven Desolate Palace. Who knows? Perhaps it is because he is brave and fearless that he was able to make it this far. No matter what, this is at most a struggle before his death. Once 1 month is up, it will be the time of his death. To be able to anger Elder Xian Ting of the Heaven Desolate Hall to such an extent, he can be considered as one of a kind. It's not just the Heaven Desolate Palace. There are more than 1 or 2 people eyeing his invitation. Without the protection of the Heaven Desolate Palace, does he think he can still live? What a fool. Although it seems like a loss to hand it over to the Heaven Desolate Palace, it is still better than losing his life. After receiving the accurate news of Yi Shiwen's refusal, all the major forces immediately took action. There were only a mere 100 invitations to the nameless Dao College, but there were more than 1 or 2 forces and individuals who wanted to obtain them. Any one of the invitations could cause a war, and this was the true purpose of the nameless Dao College. However, just as they were about to make a move, the Heaven Desolate Palace, which had been ruthlessly humiliated by Yi Shiwen, suddenly announced that no one was allowed to interfere in this matter. Even if Yi Shiwen had to die, he had to die in their hands. In particular, Elder Xian Ting flew into a rage. He had to kill Yi Shiwen with his own hands to appease the hatred in his heart. Everyone understood that the Heaven Desolate Palace had an ulterior motive. Dealing with Yi Shiwen was secondary, and the real reason was probably that they were determined to obtain the invitation. However, facing the Heaven Desolate Palace, who had already issued a kill order, no one wanted to go against them. However, this did not mean that they would just let it go. They just hit deeper. The entire Luoyue city was surging with undercurrents. Time passed day by day amidst the surging undercurrents. In the blink of an eye, a month passed in the blink of an eye. While some people were looking forward to it, this month passed in the blink of an eye. In the hearts of many ordinary people, they seemed to have forgotten about Yi Shiwen. This was because in this month, it could be said that there were many big and small things happening in Luoyue City. Diwu Xin was the first to engrave his name on the stone tablet, and his name became famous for a while. However, he was only 1 step ahead. Not long after, many other names appeared on the stone tablet. Each and every one of them was tyrannical, and their thunderous names slowly diminished people's attention towards Yi Shiwen. The only thing that could be related to this was the fact that Hua Menghan had continuously attacked, even though Yi Shiwen had hidden himself away and was in seclusion. Her opponents weren't existences like Diwu Hard-Hearted, but they were all people with illustrious reputations. There was no lack of experts at the profound death realm. In this month, the celestial Phoenix Maiden's reputation skyrocketed, and her name spread everywhere, diverting people's attention away from Yi Shiwen. However, for those who were looking forward to it, the arrival of this day was only a matter of time. It was unknown how many pairs of eyes were tightly fixed on that small courtyard. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.